Hello, friends. I'm glad you found your way here tonight. Settle in, get comfortable, maybe dim the lights around you. We're about to wander back into a time so distant that even the soil remembers more than books do. A time when survival wasn't a question of schedules or alarms or deadlines, but of whether you would even see another sunrise. And before we begin, I'm curious. Where are you listening from right now? Which corner of the world? And what hour has caught you in this story? Morning, evening, or the quiet moments of night? It always amazes me how many places can be connected by just one voice, carried across time and distance. Now, let's step back into ancient Africa. Imagine for a moment the vastness of it. Endless savannas rolling out beneath a pale sky, the rhythm of insects buzzing in the heat, and the distant roars or cries of animals that remind you, constantly, that you are not alone and not entirely safe. You wouldn't last a single day here, not because you are weak, but because the world was arranged in ways so foreign to our modern comforts that your instincts would betray you before you even realized what was happening. Picture this. You rise before the sun, not because of an alarm, but because your ears have caught the faint growl of a lion in the dark. You are not at home, you are not in control. The night belongs to predators, and the dawn is your chance to move quietly, to make yourself small, to find water before the heat presses down. Water itself was never guaranteed. Streams dried out, rivers shifted, and one mistake could leave you wandering in the shimmering mirage of the desert air. The first lesson of ancient Africa was thirst, and the second was hunger. Food was not ordered, not stored in jars and cupboards, but sought daily, hour by hour, in a landscape filled with dangers. What did they eat, you might ask? Not the feasts you see in films, not bowls of easy grain or baskets of fruit. More often, survival meant roots scraped from the earth, bitter tubers chewed slowly to trick the stomach, berries gathered cautiously because one mistake meant poison. Insects, too, were a source of strength. Termites rich with fat, locusts roasted in a fire until they popped like tiny kernels. You'd turn your face away in disgust, but to them it was life, protein, energy enough to move again. And hunting, hunting was no casual affair. You imagine men with spears running boldly toward animals, but the truth was patience, silence, and often failure. Hours could pass as you trailed a gazelle, only for the wind to shift and scatter your scent ahead of you, sending the herd flying before you even raised your arm. A single missed throw of a spear could mean another day of hunger. Yet life wasn't only fear. There was rhythm to it, a strange beauty woven into the danger. Around the fire, in the evenings, stories grew. Imagine a circle of faces lit by flickering flame, voices carrying legends older than the stars above. These weren't just stories for entertainment. They were maps of memory, telling of where the rivers had once flowed, where the lions gathered, where ancestors had walked. In these moments, you would feel the thread of belonging, the fragile net holding a small community against the immensity of the wild. But even then, safety was never full. Fires kept the hyenas at bay, but not always. A sudden laugh in the night could turn into a scream, a cry that echoed into silence, leaving the firelight smaller, the shadows deeper. That constant sense that tomorrow was never promised shaped every heartbeat. What about play? You might imagine such a life left no time for joy, but children always find ways. They made toys from bones, little rattles from dried gourds, games of chasing and leaping in the dust. For them, laughter was practice for speed, agility that one day might save them. And for adults, dance was not only celebration but survival, a way of keeping the body strong, of echoing the rhythm of drums that seemed to mirror the very pulse of the earth beneath bare feet. Still, the dangers you cannot imagine are the ones that would end you fastest. A tiny insect bite could mean fever and delirium. A simple cut from a thorn bush might fester without herbs to soothe it. Even the sun itself was an enemy, burning relentlessly, drawing sweat and salt from the body until you collapsed under its weight. Modern sunscreen, clean water, shade on demand, none of these existed. And so survival was a delicate balance, a dance with the environment that allowed no missteps. The fascinating part is how communities adapted to this. Some became gatherers of honey, climbing tall trees to face swarms of angry bees, their skin peppered with stings, but their mouths sweetened by the reward. Others learned to follow animals not just to hunt them, but to find water through them, because if zebras moved in one direction, it meant a hidden pool might be waiting. And still others found ways to use fire not just for warmth, but for reshaping the land itself, burning patches of grass to drive animals forward or to renew the soil for edible roots. You, standing there with your modern shoes and soft skin, would have no chance. Your ears are dulled by quiet rooms, your nose too unused to the faintest smell of rain or danger. Your stomach would turn at the food, your body unprepared for the long runs, the sleepless nights, the ever-watchful eyes. One day in this world would feel like a trial of years. And yet, this was life. It wasn't a punishment. It was the only reality they knew, and in its rhythm they found meaning. They weren't just surviving, they were shaping the path that would one day lead to us, to you sitting here listening in the glow of your screen. Their struggles became your inheritance, though most of us have forgotten just how fragile, how astonishing that survival really was. The night stretches on, and the story of ancient Africa has only begun. We've barely brushed the surface. The deeper we go, the more hidden truths we'll uncover. The moon drifts high above that ancient sky, silver and distant, watching as people huddle together in small clusters of warmth and shadow. Imagine the soundscape, the crackle of a fire, the whisper of grass moving in the night wind, the low hum of insects carrying their endless song. From time to time, a sharp bark echoes across the savanna, a hyena calling to its clan. The air is alive with tension, yet at the same time, there is a kind of calm. Life here was fragile, yes, but it was also deeply connected to every detail of the earth. In that world, you could not simply walk in silence. Every step carried consequence. The sand beneath your feet might tell a story you didn't want others to know. Tracks left in the dust could be read by predator and prey alike. A misplaced print might betray your camp to wandering enemies or lure a lion closer to the firelight. That's why people moved with such deliberate awareness, soft-footed and mindful, as though the earth itself were listening. During the daylight hours, survival unfolded differently. As the sun rose higher, the air grew heavy, pressing down like a weight. You would feel the sweat pooling on your brow within minutes, your breath thick and shallow. Shade was everything. The wide trees, baobabs with swollen bellies of water, or acacias with their spreading crowns, became havens not only for humans, but for every creature trying to escape the relentless sky. If you wandered without knowledge of where those trees stood, you would soon find your strength slipping away. It is easy to forget how dangerous simple thirst can be. Today, you twist a bottle cap and water is yours. Then, every sip was earned. The rivers that carved through the land shifted their banks, dried to cracked clay in dry season, flooded to raging torrents when rains finally came. Streams that once gave life might vanish, leaving behind only a memory of water. So families carried knowledge like treasure, the memory of hidden wells, the places where rain pooled in stone depressions, the trick of following birds overhead, because their flight always betrayed the direction of drinkable water. Without that wisdom, you would not last half a day. Food, too, was no certainty. Imagine waking with the ache of hunger, no cupboards to open, no markets to visit. You begin with what you can find. Roots unearthed with digging sticks, leaves chewed though bitter, seeds pounded between stones until they can be swallowed. A patch of wild figs might appear, but the branches belong to monkeys who do not share willingly. Honey might be discovered, but only after brave hands climb high, smoke the bees away, and bear the stings. There is sweetness, yes, but always a price. The great animals you picture in your mind, the herds of antelope, the heavy-shouldered buffalo, the lean zebras were never easy prey. Hunting was an art that demanded both patience and community. One man with a spear was weak. 10 men moving like shadows through the grass became possibility. They learned to encircle, to mimic the stalk of predators, to drive their quarry into traps or over cliffs. Sometimes the chase went on for hours, the hunters not running fast, but steady, relentless, until the animal collapsed from exhaustion. It was called persistence hunting, and it required a body trained for endless miles beneath a merciless sun. Could you, now, with soft shoes and water bottles at your side, run 30 kilometers after a gazelle? Could you keep your breath even while the heat pressed your bones? This was their reality. And yet, when the kill was finally made, the story was not over. Flesh had to be carved quickly before scavengers arrived. Bones were cracked open for the marrow, skin scraped clean for clothing or cord. Nothing was wasted. Even the intestines were washed and eaten, however strange it might seem to you now. Survival left no room for squeamishness. Hunger stripped away the luxury of refusal. But life was not only about the hunt. It was also about the weaving of community, the binding of people together against a landscape that cared nothing for them. Around the fire, songs rose. Some were chants that carried rhythm for dances, the steady beat of hands against drums carved from hollowed wood. Others were laments, voices that drifted upward like smoke, speaking of ancestors and spirits, and the unseen forces that moved through the land. These songs gave strength in a way no food could, reminding everyone that they were part of something larger, that the earth and sky and the creatures they feared were all connected in one great circle. Children learned by watching, by imitating. A boy would follow his father into the bush, not to hunt yet, but to see how he placed his feet, how he paused to listen, how he tested the wind with a raised hand. A girl would sit beside her mother, crushing herbs into pastes, learning which plants cooled fever, which ones soothed wounds, and which could never be touched without danger. Knowledge passed silently, in gestures and examples, until one day, without announcement, the child became capable of living alone if needed. But imagine yourself there. Imagine how every moment would stretch with tension. A wrong berry, a step too loud, a drink from the wrong pool. All could end you. Diseases you have never faced lurked in the smallest creatures. A mosquito bite might mean days of shivering fever. A worm in the water might burrow into your body unseen. And the people of ancient Africa knew this. They feared the small dangers as much as the great ones, though they wrapped that fear in stories, speaking of spirits in the rivers, curses in the air, unseen hands that punished carelessness. And still there was beauty. Have you ever seen the Milky Way in a place without lights, where the night sky is black as ink? To them it was always so. Stars burned with impossible clarity, stretching in a white river across the heavens. Around those fires, beneath those skies, people told tales of how the stars came to be, of animals turned into constellations, of ancestors watching from above. It gave them a sense of belonging, of being small but not alone. Would you survive there? One night, perhaps, if you were lucky. But as the days passed, you would feel your body breaking under the endless demands. The land would test your every weakness, and the creatures of the earth would not forgive hesitation. And yet, for them, this was not extraordinary. It was life, and they endured, and in enduring, they left a legacy that hums beneath your skin even now. The night deepens, the fire burns lower, and the shadows stretch longer. But the story of this world is far from finished. There are rituals yet to explore, secrets of the hunt still untold, mysteries of birth, death, and survival that shaped not only their world but ours. The first light of dawn breaks slowly, a pale ribbon across the horizon, painting the grasses in shades of gold and shadow. In ancient Africa, this was a signal not for leisure but for movement. People stirred not with yawns and soft stretches, but with sharp awareness. Dawn was the hour when predators returned to rest, when the land itself shifted from the dangers of the night to the demands of the day. If you were alive in that moment, your heart would beat faster, not slower. For the day ahead would always test you. The women often rose first. They carried baskets woven from reeds, gourds hollowed for water, and digging sticks smoothed by countless hands. Their task was not simple gathering. It was strategy, memory, and survival entwined. They knew which roots could be found only after a certain rain, which berries ripened in which season, which insects clung beneath the bark of fallen trees. Each walk beyond the camp was a risk, for lions were not the only danger. A rustle in the grass could mean a snake coiled and ready, A silence in the air could mean something unseen was watching. Yet they walked anyway, shoulders steady, voices low, because hunger left no choice. Meanwhile, the men prepared differently. Spears carved from wood hardened in fire, stone blades bound tightly with sinew, arrows tipped with poison from plants carefully mixed in secret ways. To you, they might seem crude. To them, they were the edge between life and death. Imagine holding one of those spears in your hand. Heavy, balanced, the wood smelling faintly of smoke. Imagine knowing that this, and only this, stood between your family and starvation. Hunting began not with running but with listening. The morning air carried clues. The distant rumble of hooves, the chatter of birds stirred into sudden flight, the faint musk of animals that had passed hours before. To walk through that land without listening was to walk blind. The hunters read every sign. A broken twig, the way the grass leaned, the wetness of fresh droppings. You could not fake this knowledge. One mistake and the trail was lost, the chance for food gone. But the land offered more than just beasts to chase. Along rivers, fish darted in the shallows. They were caught with woven traps, spears, even hands quick enough to grasp beneath stones. Their scales gleamed in the sunlight, their bodies roasted on flat stones near the fire. Insects, too, swarmed in the air. Locust clouds sometimes darkened the sky, and though the insects devoured crops and leaves, they also became a feast themselves. Collected, roasted, ground into flour. It may sound strange, but in those days you would eat what the earth gave or you would not eat at all. Yet daily life was not only about food. There was building, too. Shelters were not permanent homes as you know them. They were light, movable, shaped from branches and leaves, built to protect from sun and rain, not to last for years. A circle of huts marked a community, and in the center burned the fire, the heart of every gathering, the anchor of safety. Imagine that fire at night, crackling softly while shadows of bodies moved against the walls. Children played near it, elders told stories, hunters sharpened blades. The fire was more than light. It was a shield, a weapon, a presence that kept the night's hunger at a respectful distance. And then there were the rituals. Life in such a place was uncertain, fragile, and so people clung to moments that gave it meaning. Birth was one such moment. Women supported women, gathering in silence when labor began, chanting in low voices, pressing herbs to ease the pain. A new child was not just a person. It was a promise, a continuation of memory. Songs welcomed the baby, words spoken softly to bind the new life to the ancestors who had come before. For in this world, death was always near, and to live even a single day was a victory. Death itself, too, carried ritual. Bodies could not always be buried deeply in such soil, but they were honored nonetheless. Stones were piled, songs sung, and names spoken so they would not be lost to the winds. People believed that spirits lingered, that the dead watched and guided, that their presence remained in the rustle of trees and the call of birds. It gave comfort, yes, but also fear, because to dishonor the dead was to invite their anger, and anger from the unseen was the last thing anyone could endure. But what of joy, you might wonder? Surely this life was only hardship? Not so. Joy came in bursts, unexpected and radiant. It came with laughter when children tumbled in dust, chasing each other with painted faces. It came with dance, the stomp of bare feet against earth, the rhythm of drums that seemed to echo through the bones themselves. It came with love, too, not in the romanticized form we imagine, but in bonds of survival. Two people leaning together beneath the stars, knowing they must face the next dawn side by side. And there were games. Simple, yes, but powerful. Stones tossed in patterns, seeds moved in carved boards, contests of balance or speed. These games were more than play. They were practice for strategy, strength, endurance. They taught lessons while giving laughter, blending necessity with delight. Still, danger always circled. You would never forget it. A rustle too close at night, a silence too sudden in the day. Every sense sharpened because life demanded it. To sleep too deeply was to risk never waking. That constant edge of fear shaped the mind itself, giving rise to stories of spirits, monsters, and unseen eyes. These tales were not childish, they were warnings, coded wisdom passed from one tongue to the next. They taught children caution without needing scars. And yet, for all its danger, there was a profound connection in this life. The people belonged to the land in a way we can hardly imagine now. Every plant had a use, every sound carried meaning, every star traced a map. Nothing was wasted, nothing ignored. Even suffering was woven into the rhythm of existence. If you tried to live this way, you would break. You would seek comfort where none existed, refuse food that your stomach desperately needed, collapse beneath a sun that allowed no mercy. But those who lived then did not think of themselves as suffering. To them, this was simply the shape of life. The hardships were matched by beauty, and the fear was matched by wonder. The dawn grows brighter. The hunters slip into the grasses. The women bend to the earth. The children scatter with laughter, and the fire smolders at the heart of the camp. The story of ancient Africa continues to unfold, one breath, one heartbeat, one fragile step at a time. The heat begins to rise as the morning slips toward midday, and in the ancient lands of Africa, that heat was no small obstacle. It pressed down with a weight you could feel in your bones, wrapping the body in an invisible cloak of exhaustion. The air itself shimmered above the ground, bending the horizon, tricking the eye with visions of water where there was none. If you stood there, unprepared, you would feel your strength draining away with every breath, the dryness on your tongue growing unbearable. Yet those who lived in this world had ways to endure. They knew when to move and when to wait. They knew how to hide in the long grass, how to find shade beneath trees whose roots had split the earth for centuries. Some chewed leaves that held moisture, others cracked stems to drink the faint trickle inside. To you, it would seem like magic, the ability to draw life from barren land, but for them, it was survival woven into memory. At midday, the camp shifted. Women returned from gathering, laying down roots and fruits, insects and herbs. Some things were eaten raw, chewed quickly to quiet the hunger. Others were placed near the fire, roasted until the smoke carried their scent into the wind. Children gathered close, their eyes following every movement, waiting for their turn to taste. The sharing of food was not only necessity, it was ritual, a way of binding the group together. No one ate alone. The hunters, if successful, returned later, carrying what they had taken from the land. The body of an antelope, the glistening scales of fish, the marrow-rich bones of smaller creatures. Their arrival was met with cheers or with silence, depending on the outcome. A failed hunt meant tighter belts and hungrier nights. Yet no blame was spoken aloud. Everyone knew the land itself decided, not the hunters. Still, the weight of failure pressed heavy on shoulders that bore the lives of many. But survival was not the only rhythm. As the day lengthened, the tasks of life unfolded like a tapestry. Tools were shaped from stone and bone, sharpened again and again until they gleamed like teeth. Fibers were twisted into cord, hides stretched and scraped to make coverings against the chill of night. Women painted faces with clay and ash, marking patterns that spoke of family, of protection, of beauty. These markings were more than decoration. They were a language without words, a way of telling the world who you were and where you belonged. And then there were the sounds of music. Not music as we imagine today, with instruments tuned to perfection, but the raw music of earth itself. Drums carved from hollow logs, rattles filled with seeds, flutes shaped from reeds cut along the river. The rhythms were simple, yet they moved like a heartbeat, steady and deep. When the drums began, the people danced, their bodies twisting and leaping, feet striking dust into the air. The dance was not entertainment. It was release, it was worship, it was the body reminding itself that it was alive. Children joined, laughing, imitating, their movements clumsy but full of energy. Elders watched, some joining, others clapping in time, their eyes shining with the memory of countless dances before. The fire at night and the dance by day. These were the twin pillars of joy, balancing the constant shadow of danger. But danger never truly left. Even in laughter, the ears stayed sharp. A cry of alarm could stop the dance in an instant, silence sweeping over the camp like a wave. And when that silence fell, every heart beat faster. Every hand reached for a spear or stone. Sometimes it was nothing, a branch cracking in the wind. Other times, it was the shadow of a leopard sliding too close, or the outline of strangers on the horizon. Strangers were as dangerous as beasts, if not more so. To meet another group was uncertain. Would they offer trade, stories, alliance? Or would they strike first, eager for resources, eager for dominance? Battles were swift and brutal. Stones flew, spears clashed, shouts echoed across the savanna. There were no armies, no shields of iron, but the violence was no less real. Wounds were deep, lives lost, and the survivors carried the weight of blood long after the fight had ended. And yet, alongside conflict, there was also exchange. A group might arrive not with weapons raised but with goods to share. Beads carved from bone, shells carried from coasts far away, pigments of red and yellow earth. These objects seemed small, but they carried power. They were gifts, symbols of connection, tokens that passed between hands and told stories without needing words. Trade was fragile, yes, but it was also a thread weaving distant people together across the vastness of the land. As the sun began to sink again, the air cooled, and the land softened its grip. Shadows lengthened, and the creatures of night stirred once more. Hyenas laughed in the distance, jackals called, and the lions began their low, steady roars. The fire was built higher, its light a fragile barrier against the wild. The people drew close not just for warmth but for comfort. This was the hour of stories. Elders spoke of ancestors who shaped rivers, of spirits who walked unseen, of animals who once spoke in human voices. These tales were not told for amusement. They were guides, warnings, lessons carved in words. A child who heard them might not remember every detail, but they would remember the fear in their chest when the story spoke of careless hunters, or the pride in their heart when it spoke of clever women who outwitted danger. Stories bound them to the past, to each other, to the land itself. And as the fire crackled, faces lit in flickering orange, the people looked upward. The stars stretched overhead, impossibly bright, impossibly endless. Patterns in those stars became maps, became myths, became promises that life continued far beyond the small circle of firelight. They believed the ancestors lived among those stars, watching, guiding, sometimes judging. Every night, the sky reminded them that their lives, fragile as they were part of something vast and eternal. Would you last here beneath that sky? Could you endure the hunger, the thirst, the constant edge of fear? Perhaps for a moment, carried by adrenaline, you might. But as the days turned into nights and the nights back into days, your body would fail, your will would waver. Because this world was not built for comfort. It was built for resilience, for people who carried knowledge in their bones, who breathed caution with every breath. And yet, there is something in that life that calls to us still. A simplicity, a closeness to the land, a truth that we have long buried beneath walls and wires and endless noise. In those nights by the fire, in those dances beneath the sun, there was a rhythm to life that we have lost, and perhaps it is that loss that makes us listen, even now. The fire burns low again. The camp settles. Somewhere beyond the grasses, the eyes of predators gleam. But here, in the circle of light, people sleep, dream, and prepare to rise once more to face the unforgiving dawn. Morning begins not with silence, but with a symphony of the land. Birds call out across the savanna, each voice layered upon the next until the air is thick with sound. Some cries warn of predators, others announce territory, still others simply celebrate the dawn. To those who lived in ancient Africa, these voices were more than background noise. They were signals, guides, and sometimes warnings. A sudden hush among the birds meant danger close at hand. A chorus rising from the trees meant water nearby. You would not know the difference. They did. The people woke with the light, stretching bodies that bore the marks of labor, of running, of carrying. Every scar on their skin was a memory. A hunt survived, a snake avoided, a fall endured. They carried their history on their bodies, visible for all to see. Unlike us, they had no walls to separate them from the land. Their skin was the only barrier, their muscles the only shield. Work began at once. Fires were rekindled from the coals that smoldered through the night. Children fetched water if it was near, or else followed their mothers in long treks to hidden pools. The gourds they carried were heavy when full, yet they walked with practiced steps, balancing the burden on their heads as if it weighed nothing. You would stagger under that weight, your neck aching, your shoulders screaming. But they had done it since childhood, and to them it was as natural as breathing. Meals were simple, if meals could even be called such. A mash of roots softened by fire, berries gathered at dawn, insects roasted until their shells cracked open. Sometimes there was meat, though never guaranteed. The taste of smoke clung to everything, for fire was the only tool of transformation, the line between raw survival and something almost like comfort. But daily life was not merely about filling the belly. The people had tasks that shaped their existence in quieter ways. Stones were chipped into tools, flakes sharp enough to cut flesh, cores shaped into scrapers to clean hides. This was not random work. Each strike of stone against stone followed patterns known only to skilled hands. One wrong angle and the blade broke, wasted. Yet in their rhythm, they carved technology as vital to them as computers are to us. Women wove fibers from plants into cords, twisted strong enough to bind tools, to carry loads, to tie shelters together. Beads were carved from bone and shell, strung into necklaces that told stories of family or marked moments of life. Some beads were carried for beauty, yes, but others were talismans, protection against the unseen. Every object had meaning, nothing was made without reason. And what of health? Imagine living in a world where one cut could fester into death, where one fever might take you from strong to helpless in days. They had no doctors as we know them, but they had healers. These men and women knew plants by scent and shape, by the color of their flowers and the bitterness of their sap. Leaves crushed into paste soothed wounds, bark brewed into tea cooled fever. Smoke from certain herbs drove away insects. It was knowledge passed through whispers and memory, knowledge that could mean the difference between life and silence. But even the healers were not always enough. Death was a constant companion, never far from the camp. Infants slipped away in the night, hunters fell to unseen fangs, elders grew weak when their strength finally failed. And yet, death was not seen as an end. It was a passage. The dead were remembered in song, in ritual, in the stories told around the fire. Their names were spoken long after their bodies were gone, carried in the air as if the sound itself kept them alive. Despite this shadow, life carried joy. The children, especially, brought laughter into the camp. They played with bones carved into toys, tossed stones in patterns, raced each other barefoot across the dust. Their games were not idle, they were training. Every chase prepared them to run from danger. Every contest of strength prepared them for the hunt. Even in play, the lessons of survival pressed close. There were moments, too, of intimacy, though not as we imagine with roses and candlelight. Affection grew from partnership, from trust, from the knowledge that two people could depend on one another in a world where nothing was certain. Couples worked side by side, carried burdens together, whispered in the dark when the fire burned low. Their love was practical, yes, but no less real. It was survival strengthened by tenderness. Still, the land was always testing. A sudden drought could empty rivers and leave the soil cracked like old skin. People wandered further in search of water, risking encounters with strangers whose tempers were sharpened by the same thirst. Storms, when they came, swept across the land with violent winds, tearing at shelters, drenching the earth until rivers swallowed everything near their banks. You had to bend with the land, to move when it demanded, to stay when it allowed. Stubbornness was death. And above it all, the sky stretched vast and endless. By day, the sun ruled without mercy. By night, the stars gave comfort, mapping the heavens in stories told again and again. Some said the Milky Way was a path of ash left by a great fire. Others said it was a river in the sky, carrying the souls of the dead. When children asked questions, the elders answered not with explanations of science, but with tales that wrapped mystery around truth. And those tales lasted longer than flesh, longer than the camps themselves. Could you endure such a life? Imagine walking barefoot across thorns until your soles grew thick with calluses. Imagine drinking water that tasted of mud and risked sickness with every swallow. Imagine sleeping to the sound of predators, never knowing if the shadow beyond the fire would cross into light. You would not endure, not for long. Your body would falter, your spirit would break. But for them, this was not endurance. This was life, and in its rhythm they found belonging. The sun climbs higher. The land hums with insects. The people move through it like shadows, each step deliberate, each breath a reminder that survival is earned, never given. The day stretches ahead, filled with unseen trials, and still they move forward, because there is no other choice. The afternoon settles heavy on the land, a stillness broken only by the buzz of insects and the low hum of heat rising from the earth. Shadows shrink, the air thickens, and the world feels almost suspended, caught between breath and silence. In this hour, the people move slower, conserving strength. They sit in the shade of trees, their bodies glistening with sweat, their hands busy even in rest, carving tools, weaving baskets, mending nets. Rest was never idleness, for idleness was a luxury this world refused to offer. Children sprawled in the dust, drawing patterns with sticks, imitating the hunters they admired. One boy gripped a branch as though it were a spear, chasing an invisible antelope across the clearing, his laughter sharp in the hot air. Another child crouched low, mimicking the stealth of a stalking cat, her eyes narrowed, her movements deliberate. Even their play mirrored survival, because every gesture they practiced would one day mean the difference between life and death. The elders, meanwhile, spoke softly, their voices carrying stories that drifted like smoke. They spoke of past hunts, of journeys made when rivers dried, of times when the land itself seemed to turn hostile and survival demanded cleverness beyond strength. These stories were not told for entertainment. They were instruction, folded into narrative, reminders that the past lived within them, shaping the choices of the present. And then came preparation for what always loomed, the hunt. Not every day, but often enough that the rhythm of life bent toward it. Men tested their spears, running fingers along the sharpened tips, tightening bindings of sinew, repairing shafts worn from use. Arrows were checked, poison reapplied in careful strokes. The poison was drawn from plants that hid their danger behind harmless leaves, mixed with knowledge passed down in whispers. A scratch of that poison could bring down a beast or kill a careless hunter. Handling it required respect, almost reverence. When the hunt began, it was not chaos. It was silence. The men slipped into the grasses, bodies low, every step measured. Their eyes scanned for the smallest movement, the faintest sign. A hoofprint pressed deep into mud, a blade of grass bent where an animal had passed, the distant tremor of hooves rolling across the earth. The hunters moved like shadows, communicating with gestures so subtle that you would not notice. A raised hand, a glance, a tilt of the chin. Words had no place in such moments. Sound was betrayal. Sometimes the hunt stretched for hours, even days. Persistence was their weapon. The prey was faster, yes, but humans had endurance. They could sweat, could cool their bodies as they ran, while the animals overheated. A gazelle might dart and leap, swift as wind, but the hunters followed, steady, relentless, until the animal weakened, slowed, faltered. The final strike was sudden, brutal, and necessary. Blood stained the dust, life ended, and survival continued. But the return to camp was not only about meat. It was about triumph. The hunters carried their kill with pride, their bodies exhausted, their faces marked with dust and sweat. The people welcomed them with songs, the women ululating in high voices, the children leaping in excitement. It was more than food. It was proof that the community could endure another stretch of days. The animal was honored, thanked, even in death, for giving its life to sustain human ones. Bones would become tools, skin would become coverings, sinew would become thread. Nothing wasted, nothing forgotten. Yet not every hunt ended this way. Sometimes the prey escaped, and the hunters returned empty-handed. Their faces carried the weight of hunger, their silence heavier than words. The camp understood. No anger was spoken, but the absence of food pressed down on everyone. Stomachs growled louder, eyes turned sharper, patience grew thin. It was in these moments that survival felt most fragile, and the people leaned harder on the stories, the songs, the rituals that reminded them they had endured before and would endure again. As the day bent toward evening, the light shifted, softer now, stretching shadows across the ground. The land stirred once more. Birds called louder. Animals emerged from the thickets. Predators began their nightly roam. This was the most dangerous hour, the thin line between day and night when the world held both sets of rules at once. Fires were lit higher, sparks rising into the darkening air. Women stirred pots of food, mixing herbs with meat if it was found, or with roots and insects if it was not. The smell of smoke and cooking drifted outward, a double-edged signal. Comfort for the people, invitation for scavengers. Around the fire, life returned to rhythm. Faces glowed in the flicker of flame, shadows dancing along the curved walls of huts. The drums began, low and steady, then rising as voices joined. Songs rose into the night, some playful, some solemn, some carrying words so old that no one remembered their first speaker. The children danced, the adults followed, feet striking the earth in patterns that echoed heartbeat and breath. In that moment, danger seemed far away, though it never truly was. And then came the stories, the lifeblood of memory. Elders spoke of animals who had once walked as humans, of rivers that shifted because spirits grew angry, of hunters who became stars in the sky after their bravery. These were not fairy tales. They were maps of meaning, teaching children where to step, what to fear, how to respect the land that both fed and threatened them. Each story wove threads between past and present, reminding the people that they were not alone, that ancestors stood behind them, invisible but near. Above, the sky deepened into black, stars cutting through the dark like shards of fire. The Milky Way arched overhead, a glowing river that seemed to flow forever. The people gazed upward, some whispering prayers, others tracing shapes with their fingers, naming constellations not with Greek myths, but with their own stories of lions and hunters, of great fires and eternal rivers. To them, the stars were not distant. They were companions, guides, the light of ancestors who never truly left. Would you find comfort in such a night? Perhaps in the beauty, yes, but the unease would never leave you. Beyond the fire's reach, eyes glowed, teeth waited. One careless moment, one step into shadow, and you would vanish into silence. Yet they, the people of that land, lived with this reality every night, and still they laughed, still they sang, still they dreamed. For this was not simply survival. It was existence shaped by rhythm, by connection, by resilience. They endured not because they had no choice, but because their lives were bound to the land in ways we can no longer imagine. Every dawn brought risk, every night carried fear, but between those, they wove a life filled with meaning, with beauty, with stories that still echo, faint but unbroken, into our present. The fire burns low once more. The camp drifts into silence, each person curling close, the drums fading into the hum of insects and the steady breath of sleepers. The land waits, patient, ready to test them again with the first light of day. The night deepens until the fire is only embers, glowing faintly, breathing warmth into the dark. Around it, the camp lies silent, though silence in this place is never absolute. The hiss of insects, the distant cry of an owl, the sudden shriek of something caught and silenced in the grass. All these sounds remind you that the night belongs to more than just the people huddled near the flames. Sleep here is never total surrender. It is a bargain struck with the darkness, a gamble that the fire's smoke and the closeness of others will keep you safe until dawn. But imagine yourself lying there, on the bare earth, a thin hide pulled over your shoulders. Every rustle makes your heart leap. The stars above are sharp and infinite, and though they are beautiful, they also remind you of how exposed you are, how small. And then comes a sound, low, guttural, rolling through the air, a lion's call. Far but not far enough. Your body stiffens, even though you know the others around you have heard it too. They shift slightly but do not panic. fear is familiar to them, woven into life. You, however, would not sleep again that night. The hours crawl, the air cooling, dew forming on grasses and leaves. In the earliest moments before dawn, when the sky softens into pale blue and birds stir awake, the people rise too. Sleep was not long, but it was enough. Fires are rekindled, glowing embers coaxed into flame. The camp begins to move, children rubbing their eyes, women stretching, men walking out to scout the edges of the settlement. The first task is always the same, to ensure nothing has disturbed the camp while it slept. Tracks in the dust tell stories, of hyenas sniffing the perimeter, of small antelope passing through, of snakes sliding silently near but not entering. To read these signs is as vital as breathing. You would look at the ground and see only dirt. They look and see a full account of the night. Food is the next concern, and it does not wait for comfort. A group leaves quickly, some women with woven baskets slung across their backs, some men carrying spears and nets. They know the paths that lead to fruiting trees, to streams where fish gather, to places where roots can be dug. For them, the land is a memory, every turn a recalled story, every plant a name. For you, each bush looks the same, each path indistinguishable. You would be lost in moments. Today, luck is found in berries ripening in clusters, red and sweet, though caution guides every hand. Some berries that shine brightest carry poison, bitter death wrapped in tempting color. The women taste carefully, recognizing the flavor, the smell, the slight stickiness of the juice. They know the difference because forgetting would mean a child's body stiffening, lips darkening, breath failing. Knowledge of plants is as essential as the spear. Without it, the land would devour you in silence. Elsewhere, men set traps along animal trails, simple but clever. A bent branch tied with sinew, a snare hidden beneath leaves, a pit dug and disguised. Patience is the true hunter. You might think hunting is only chase and strike, but often it is waiting, allowing the land itself to become your weapon. Hours might pass before an animal blunders into a trap, and in those hours you must endure hunger, thirst, stillness. Could you? While some search for food, others tend to the camp. Women grind seeds between stones, the rhythm echoing like a heartbeat. Children fetch water in clay vessels, careful not to spill, for each drop is precious. Young boys practice throwing small spears at a target carved into a tree. Girls learn from their mothers how to weave tight patterns into baskets, the weave so fine it can hold even tiny grains. Work is constant, but in this constancy is survival. And then there is the craft of making fire. You might imagine it easy, strike stones, sparks fly, but in truth it is a slow, stubborn process. 2 sticks rub together, heat building until a wisp of smoke curls upward, then a spark, then a fragile ember. Dry grass cradles it, breath feeds it, and suddenly flame blossoms into life. This is power, perhaps the most vital power they hold. Without fire, meat rots, predators circle closer, nights become unbearable. Fire is warmth, protection, transformation. To know how to make it is to control the line between life and death. For you, used to matches or lighters, it would feel like an impossible miracle, and you would not last long without someone else's skill. The sun climbs higher, burning away the coolness of morning, and once again the heat presses down. Work continues, though bodies move slower. Men sharpen stones into blades, napping with precision. Chips fly as they strike one rock against another, shaping an edge so sharp it can cut flesh cleanly. Women strip fibers from plants, twisting them into cord. Children, restless, invent games, racing across the clearing, imitating animals, tossing bones as though they were dice. These games are more than distraction. They are lessons hidden in play, practice for the tasks of adulthood. And always danger lingers. A shout breaks the calm. Someone has spotted movement at the tree line. Spears are gripped, bodies tense. For a moment, fear hangs thick. Lion, hyena, leopard? The shape resolves. Not predator, but rival humans. Another group, lean, cautious, approaching slowly. Meetings like this are unpredictable. Sometimes they bring trade, stone for shell, hide for meat. Sometimes they bring conflict, sudden and brutal. Trust is fragile in a world where every resource means survival. The two groups face each other, the air heavy with suspicion. No words are spoken at first, only gestures. Spears lowered, not dropped. Eyes fixed. You would feel your pulse hammering in your ears. Every muscle tensed for flight. But they read each subtle sign. The way shoulders shift, the angle of a head tilt, the steadiness of a gaze. These are negotiations older than language, older than memory. This time, peace holds. Small gifts are exchanged, murmured words follow, and the strangers drift away, leaving only tension behind. When they are gone, relief washes through the camp, though no one celebrates. For every peaceful encounter, there are stories of raids, of blood spilled, of children taken. Human danger is as constant as animal danger. You might survive the lions one night only to face a spear at dawn. The day lengthens, shadows stretch, the land exhales in slow rhythm, preparing again for night. And you, if you had made it this far, would already feel the weight of exhaustion, your body bruised by ground, your mind frayed by fear, your stomach tight with hunger. You would glance at the horizon, wondering how many more days could pass like this. For them, it was not a question. It was life, and it would continue, as it always had. The evening light softens, turning the sky into a canvas of fading gold and bruised purple. Shadows stretch long across the clearing, merging with the dark edges of the forest. The people move with purpose, for this time of day is dangerous. Dusk is when many hunters stir. Lions rise from their rest, hyenas laugh from beyond sight, and leopards slip silently into motion. To linger carelessly outside the glow of fire is to invite death. So preparations begin. Wood gathered in hurried bundles, flames fed until they grow strong, hides drawn closer around the little shelters. The camp becomes a small island of light in an endless sea of shadow. You, if you stood there, would notice how much discipline it takes. Children are hushed, not allowed to wander. Meat caught in the day is cut, roasted quickly, consumed, for to leave it lying out would draw predators to the scent. Every task at this hour is about control, about tightening the fragile boundary between humans and the vast world that encircles them. And in those moments, you would feel again how little power you truly hold without the knowledge they carry. Dinner is not a feast, not the abundance you might imagine when thinking of a successful hunt. Portions are small, shared carefully. The strongest do not eat the most. Mothers often feed children before themselves. Pieces of roasted antelope flesh, a few handfuls of berries, roots boiled until soft. This is the measure of a good night. If you expected overflowing plates, spices, sweetness, you would be disappointed. And yet, the taste here is sharper, truer. Every bite has been earned by sweat, by vigilance, by skill. That makes it sweeter than any feast you know. As the fire cracks and spits, voices rise. Stories begin, not idle chatter, but living memory. Around the fire, old men tell of hunts where lions were outwitted, of journeys across rivers swollen with crocodiles, of meetings with other tribes both friendly and cruel. Their words are more than entertainment. They are lessons wrapped in rhythm. Children listen with wide eyes, storing these tales in their minds. For one day those same stories may save their lives. And in those voices, in the flicker of flames on weathered faces, you sense something timeless. This is how history began. Spoken, never written, passed from lips to ears across endless generations. And sometimes the stories turn darker, into whispered warnings. Of spirits said to walk in the tall grass, of ancestors who watch from the stars, of curses that follow those who break ancient taboos. Whether you believe in such things or not, the fear they inspire is real, and in a place so full of danger, every belief has weight. For you, raised on reason and proof, it might seem like superstition. But imagine being here, hearing a hyena laugh in the distance while an elder says that laugh carries the voices of the dead. You would shiver and draw closer to the fire. When the stories fade, songs begin. Low, steady rhythms, voices weaving together, hands striking hollow logs or clapping in complex patterns. The music is not performance, it is ritual, it is binding. It lifts the spirits, reminds the group of unity. For in a world that is so hostile, togetherness is their greatest shield. Alone, no one survives. The fire, the food, the songs, all of it is a defense as vital as spear or trap. But even with unity, the night is long. Someone must keep watch. Sleep comes in turns, and the task of guard is heavy. A watcher sits by the fire, spear across his knees, eyes scanning the dark. Every rustle in the grass is suspect, every flicker of movement a possible threat. Hours pass in silence, broken only by crackling wood and insect hum. For you, used to doors, walls, locks, the vulnerability would be unbearable. You would fight to stay awake, yet your eyelids would sink, and in that moment of weakness, death could slip silently from the dark. Dawn comes slowly. First the sky softens, then the first birds call. The people stir again, stretching weary limbs, rising to another day. There is no luxury of rest. Life resumes immediately, and with it comes the constant question: where will the next meal come from? This day brings movement. The camp must not linger too long in one place, or the land will exhaust itself. Berries stripped bare, roots dug out, game frightened away. So the decision is made. They will travel. Belongings are gathered, baskets slung over shoulders, tools tied with fiber cords, hides rolled tight. Children are carried when they tire, though often even the youngest must walk. Nothing is wasted, nothing unnecessary is brought. Every item carried has value, every ounce of weight must earn its place. The journey begins. The line of people moves like a slow river, winding through tall grasses, across open plains, into groves of trees. The sun grows harsh quickly, pressing down with relentless heat. Sweat beads, throats dry, and still they march. Their eyes scan constantly, watching for fruit in branches, for tracks in the dust, for water shimmering in the distance. Every step is a search. You would stumble quickly, blinded by sameness, disoriented by endless horizon. They, however, see patterns invisible to you. A bent blade of grass means something passed this way. A cluster of bird calls hints at water nearby. To them, the land speaks. To you, it would remain silent. And then comes discovery. A shallow stream, glinting in the light. Relief spreads through the group as they kneel, cupping water into their mouths, washing dust from their skin. Children laugh, splashing, though mothers quickly hush them. Streams can be traps. Crocodiles lurk, silent, beneath the surface. No one forgets this, not even in joy. Spears are kept ready, eyes never resting too long. You might drink freely, recklessly, but they know restraint. Too much water at once, too fast, can weaken a body already strained. Even drinking requires wisdom here. The path continues and the land shifts subtly. Trees spread wider, grasses grow taller, the hum of insects deepens. This is new territory, full of promise but also full of danger. Animals unseen before might lurk here. Plants unfamiliar might tempt with false sweetness. Yet the people are not afraid. They are cautious, but they trust their knowledge, their adaptability. For this is what survival has always demanded, not mastery, but respect. To live here is to bow to the land's power, to move with it, not against it. As night approaches again, they settle once more. Fires are built, stories told, food shared. Another day has been survived. And you, watching this cycle unfold, would begin to understand the truth. It is not that you could not last a day here because of the lions or the heat or the hunger alone. It is because life here requires a constant awareness, a relentless vigilance, a patience with the earth that modern life has stripped from you. Here, there is no pause, no comfort, no safety that lasts more than an hour. And that is why, though these people endure, you would not. The night wind carries strange sounds. The people settle into their circle, fires glowing like watchful eyes. Yet beyond the faint edge of light, the vast dark stirs. Hyenas yelp and giggle, lions cough low in the distance, and somewhere out there, a single owl calls. You imagine sitting there, bare feet in the dust, the smoke of the fire clinging to your skin, and you realize how little separates you from that world. No walls, no iron, no weapon but a sharpened stick or a chipped stone. Every sound feels personal, directed at you. Even the silence between those sounds is heavier than anything you've known, as if the earth itself is holding its breath. And yet, they live within this symphony of danger as though it were a natural rhythm. A mother rocks her child to sleep with soft hums. Young men whisper, sharpening spear points by rubbing stone against stone. Elders stare into the fire, eyes reflecting memories of hunts and hardships. For them, the night is not the end of safety. It is part of the cycle. Fear is never absent, but it does not rule them. If you tried to join them, your fear would eat you alive. Sleep would not come easily, and if it did, it would be filled with visions of teeth and claws. When morning breaks, it comes not gently but suddenly. The sun lifts itself above the horizon with ruthless brightness, flooding the land with gold and white. The air, cool in the hours before dawn, begins heating with unnerving speed. Children stir first, tugging at parents, hungry already. But food must be found. The small scraps of meat left from yesterday are long gone. Bellies tighten again, and so, spears are lifted, baskets slung across backs, and the search resumes. This day, the hunters decide to test the plains. Antelope tracks are found, fresh enough to excite them. The men whisper, eyes narrowing, hands tightening on their weapons. You follow in your imagination, though in truth you would never keep pace. Their steps are silent, their breath controlled, their bodies moving in low, fluid motions. Hours pass as they track, patience unbroken. For you, the waiting would be unbearable, the heat unbearable, the hunger gnawing. But for them, this is life itself, the skill that separates existence from extinction. At last, the antelope are sighted, graceful creatures grazing in the distance, ears twitching, legs coiled to run at the slightest threat. A plan is whispered, bodies spread wide, each man sliding into position. Spears are balanced in strong hands, muscles tense, and then motion. The antelope bolt, a blur of power across the grassland. Shouts erupt, feet pound the dust, spears fly through the air. One misses, another grazes, but a third finds its mark. An animal stumbles, collapses, thrashing. In that instant, the men surge forward, ending its struggle quickly. Silence follows, heavy but victorious. The return to camp is triumphant but subdued. For though a kill brings life, it is never taken lightly. The animal is carried with respect, laid out before the elders, and words are murmured, thanks to the earth, to the spirit of the creature, to the unseen forces that govern survival. You might see only meat, but they see the fragile balance between life and death. This awareness has been etched into their bones. Without it, the land would turn against them. The women work swiftly, cutting, dividing, roasting, boiling. The smell of cooking flesh rises into the air, mingling with the scent of earth and smoke. Children crowd close, eager, but are kept at bay until portions are ready. Nothing is wasted. Bones are cracked for marrow, hide is stretched for use, sinew pulled for cordage. Even the stomach of the antelope might be cleaned and used as a vessel. You, used to abundance and waste, would find this meticulousness strange, maybe even harsh. But here, survival depends on never taking more than the land can give, and never leaving behind what it has offered. When hunger is quieted, a rare moment of leisure arrives. Some sit and mend baskets with careful weaving. Others carve new spear shafts, humming quietly. Children play, chasing one another in the dust, their laughter ringing bright against the vast emptiness. You might think of leisure as games or luxuries, but here, leisure is simply a pause without hunger pressing at the ribs. It is peace without the shadow of predators looming close. That, in itself, is precious. And yet, there is always something lurking. In the afternoon heat, when the camp lies heavy with rest, danger can slip closer. The hunters, returning from checking traps, spot movement near the edge of the camp. A hyena, bold with hunger, slinks closer, jaws glinting. A shout rises, spears are lifted, and the animal flees, but the message is clear. The camp is never beyond reach of death. Even in moments of calm, the land reminds them, no one is safe. Evening comes again, and the fire burns once more. Tonight, however, the mood shifts. The elders speak of the old ways. How long ago, their people came from rivers further south, walking across mountains, carrying nothing but fire and stone. They speak of others they met, some friendly, some violent, some lost to time. You feel the weight of history in those words, history that was never written, only spoken, kept alive by memory alone. It is fragile, and yet it endures, stronger than stone carvings or monuments, because it lives in the rhythm of the living. As stars rise above the clearing, glittering with impossible clarity, you would tilt your head back and feel small. These people believe the ancestors live among those stars, watching, guiding, warning. They say when a shooting star cuts the sky, it is a spirit passing across the heavens. For you, perhaps it is science, a rock burning in the atmosphere. For them, it is family. And in that moment, who can say which truth carries more power? The night stretches long. A child stirs from sleep, whispering of dreams where animals spoke with human voices. An elder nods gravely, saying such dreams are signs, not to be ignored. Somewhere in the distance, lions roar, the sound rolling across the plains like thunder. The people do not flinch. They listen, they mark the distance. They know if danger is coming closer. You would tremble, clutching at the fire, but they simply adjust the logs, keep watch, and continue. This, perhaps, is the greatest difference. Where you would be paralyzed by fear, they are shaped by it. They carry fear, but do not let it crush them. Fear is their teacher, their reminder, their sharp edge that keeps them alive. And so another day ends, another night begins, the cycle repeating, relentless, eternal. The fire dwindles into glowing embers, yet sleep is not immediate. A soft wind brushes through the grass, carrying with it the scent of dust, ash, and distant rain. The people lie close together, bodies curled for warmth against the chill that creeps into the hours before dawn. You try to imagine it. No blanket, no pillow, just the earth as your bed. A thin hide perhaps between you and the ground, and the sound of insects whispering ceaselessly around you. Sleep does not come in long, uninterrupted stretches. It comes in fragments, shallow moments, always half alert. The crack of a twig can bring eyes open. The faint growl of a predator can freeze the camp into silence. Sleep is never safe here. And yet, morning rises again, as it always must. The first rays of sunlight filter through dust and smoke, casting long shadows of the huts and figures stirring awake. The people rise slowly, stretching, rubbing at eyes heavy from the broken night. A few carry embers to restart fires, blowing gently until flames spark again. For you, mornings mean coffee, warm showers, soft beginnings. Here, mornings mean hunger pressing once more at the ribs and the quiet question, what will we eat today? Today is not for the hunters alone. The women gather with baskets slung across their shoulders, heading toward the bush to seek roots, berries, and edible leaves. Their eyes are sharp, trained to see life where you would see only endless brown. A faint green sprout tells them of a tuber hidden beneath the soil. A cluster of small fruits, bitter if eaten too soon, sweet if timed just right. They move in groups not only for company but for safety, for the bush hides as much danger as it does food. You would not last among them. Their knowledge is vast and invisible, passed down in gestures, in stories, in half-spoken warnings. One plant nourishes, another poisons. One root soothes the stomach, another burns the throat. Mistake them, and you could be dead within hours. They have no books, no written guides, no instructions. They carry this library inside their minds, and every generation adds to it or loses it. To walk beside them would be to realize how blind you are, how helpless in a land that demands knowledge written not in ink but in survival. As the women dig and gather, children trail behind, learning in silence, their hands touching the soil, their eyes memorizing every motion. The smallest ones find insects and begin chewing them casually. Grubs, fat and white, wriggling still, popped into their mouths like snacks. For them, this is natural. For you, it would be unthinkable, but the protein in those small creatures often makes the difference between hunger and strength. Insects, roots, fruits, anything that can fill the belly without harm is taken. Nothing is beneath them, nothing is strange, because nothing can be wasted. Meanwhile, the hunters set out again, but not for antelope this time. Today, their eyes turn upward. Birds, with carefully crafted nets and slings, they move quietly through the tall grass, searching for nests. Eggs are precious, fragile gifts, high in energy and rare enough to spark excitement. Climbing trees is dangerous, not only for the risk of falling, but for snakes that coil around branches, watching, striking without warning. Yet the hunters climb anyway, nimble and fearless, their feet gripping bark, their hands reaching carefully for the pale shells hidden among leaves. Sometimes their efforts are met with chaos. A sudden flutter of wings, sharp cries of birds defending their young, and the hunters must act quickly, grabbing what they can and descending fast. You can almost hear the flurry of wings, the clash of sound, the thrill of victory as they return with handfuls of eggs. Small, fragile, yet enough to feed children waiting back at camp. By midday, the camp is alive again. Women return with heavy baskets, hunters with eggs, gatherers with insects wrapped in leaves. Fires are stoked higher, pots balanced on stones. The smell rises once more, roasting roots, sizzling grubs, eggs cracked and cooked in their own shells. The children eat first, as always, for they are the fragile thread of tomorrow. Their bellies round slightly after a meal, though tomorrow the hunger will return. But today, there is satisfaction, and satisfaction brings joy. The people laugh, sing, clap their hands in rhythm. Some tap sticks on the ground, creating a simple drumbeat. Voices rise together in melody, raw and powerful, echoing across the plains. For a brief time, life feels more than survival, it feels like belonging. The sound of song is not just for pleasure. It binds the group, reassures each member that they are not alone, that the dangers of the night can be faced together. You sit in your imagination, listening. The harmony is unlike any music you know. No instruments, no written notes, only the raw voices of human beings carrying sound into the sky. And you realize, this is what the first music of the world must have sounded like. Born not for performance, not for beauty alone, but for survival, for spirit, for unity. Yet the land is always watching, always waiting. Clouds gather in the distance, dark and heavy, promising rain. Rain can mean life, water to drink, plants to grow, but it can also mean sudden floods, dangerous rivers, sickness that seeps into the camp. The elders glance toward the horizon, their faces thoughtful, voices low. They remember past storms, when rivers swallowed whole camps, when sickness swept through like fire, leaving silence where laughter once was. As the storm approaches, preparations begin. Huts are reinforced with grass and mud, spears kept close, baskets secured. The people know that water can bring predators nearer, drawn by thirst. Crocodiles stir in swollen rivers, hippos grow restless, snakes slither into higher ground seeking refuge. You might think of rain as cleansing, but here, rain is power, both gift and threat. By evening, the first drops fall, tapping the leaves, darkening the soil. Then comes the downpour, sudden, violent, drumming against the earth until everything runs with water. The fires sputter, smoke curling low, but they are kept alive by careful hands shielding the flames. Families huddle together, bodies pressed close beneath hides, waiting. The sound is deafening, the world blurred into sheets of falling water. And in that chaos, the night comes again. Imagine lying there, shivering in the cold, soaked to the bone, the ground beneath you softening into mud, and knowing that at any moment something could emerge from the dark. A predator seeking shelter, a snake sliding into the warmth of bodies, a flood rising higher. You would not sleep, you could not sleep. Yet for them, it is another night, another cycle, another test of endurance. The storm leaves behind a silence heavier than noise. The ground breathes steam as the sun rises, and the air feels thick, sticky, as though the world itself is sweating. Pools of water glitter across the plain, temporary lakes filled with mud, frogs, and insects already singing. For the people, this is both blessing and burden. The storm has brought water, yes, but also change. Paths washed away, animal tracks blurred, new dangers hidden in the grass. The camp stirs with caution. Fires must be relit, and wet wood smokes harshly, filling the air with a bitter sting. The smell of damp earth mixes with it, and the people cough softly, waving away the haze. They are used to this discomfort. For you, one evening of rain might mean warmth indoors, the soft hum of electricity, clothes tumbling in a dryer. Here, it means rising with mud clinging to your skin, every step heavy, every breath thick. But there is no time to dwell on it. Food must be found, as always. After storms, the land changes, and opportunities arise. Roots loosen in the wet ground, easier to dig out. Mushrooms sprout overnight, clustered beneath fallen logs. But mushrooms are dangerous. Some bring life, others death. Only the elders, with eyes trained across decades, can tell the difference, and even then, mistakes have been made. A single wrong choice can poison not just one, but an entire family. The children, excited by the puddles, splash and chase frogs, laughing, their feet dark with mud. Their joy is fragile but necessary, for joy is survival too. Frogs are not only playthings. Some are caught, roasted on sticks, their legs eaten with relish. Others are avoided, for their skin carries toxins that burn the mouth and swell the throat. The children must learn which is which, and they learn fast. Childhood here is brief, innocence shorter still. Hunting after rain is both easier and harder. Animals leave clearer prints in the soft earth, but the wet ground muffles sound poorly, and movement through sodden grass alerts every ear. The hunters move anyway, their bodies painted in streaks of mud for camouflage. Spears are gripped tighter, nets carried over shoulders, and silence becomes their language. You try to imagine yourself among them, your feet sinking, your steps clumsy, your breath too loud. They would shake their heads at you, amused perhaps, but also wary, for mistakes mean wasted energy, wasted time, and perhaps danger. They follow the spoor of small antelope, fresh tracks pressed into the mud. The animals are cautious after storms, drinking carefully at puddles, alert for predators that lurk nearby. Lions hunt more after rain, their own steps muffled in the softened ground. To hunt here is to compete not only with the prey but with the masters of the hunt themselves. And you? You would never know if those faint impressions in the mud belong to antelope, zebra, or something watching you. Back at camp, women gather herbs loosened by the rain. Leaves with healing properties are prized, crushed into pastes, rubbed into wounds. The storm brings sickness too. Mosquitoes rise from stagnant pools, their whining buzz constant, their bites carriers of fever. You know mosquito bites as small irritations, forgotten after hours. Here they can kill. Malaria spreads silently, and fever can take a strong hunter within days. The people fight it with plants, with bitter brews that scorch the throat yet sometimes hold back death. Other times, nothing can be done but wait and hope. As the sun climbs higher, the camp grows restless. The wet ground releases heat, turning the air into a heavy blanket. Sweat pours from every pore, dripping, soaking the skin. Flies buzz endlessly, crawling into eyes, mouths, ears. You might swat at them impatiently, unable to endure, but here endurance is life. The people ignore them, or rather, they accept them as part of existence. To rage against flies is as useless as raging against the sun. By afternoon, the hunters return, weary but triumphant. A small antelope, lean and nervous-eyed, has been brought down. The animal is carried on shoulders, its legs bound with vine. Blood stains the hunter's arms, yet their eyes shine with pride. It is not a large kill, but it is meat, and meat means strength. The children cheer, dancing around the returning men, their joy bubbling over like the puddles left by rain. The animal is laid on the ground, its body still warm. A prayer is whispered, a gesture of thanks, hands lifted briefly to the sky. Then knives of bone and sharpened stone go to work, slicing, cutting, separating skin from flesh. Blood is caught in gourds to be drunk or cooked, nothing wasted. Organs are removed swiftly, heart, liver, stomach, all considered food, all valued. You might look away, queasy, unaccustomed to the intimacy of death. But here it is not horror. It is survival, it is respect, it is necessity. The smell of roasting meat rises once again, mingling with the lingering damp of the storm. Children's mouths water. Adults stand patiently, waiting for their share. Portions are measured by tradition. Elders receive the first choice, hunters next, women and children after. It may seem unfair to you, but this order keeps the balance of respect and duty. Without elders, wisdom dies. Without hunters, food ceases. Without mothers, children cannot live. Each role depends on the other, each meal reinforces the chain. Evening comes, and with it, stories. The storm has cleared the air, and the sky is brilliant with stars, sharp and endless above the plain. Families gather close, the fire rekindled stronger now that the wood is drying. Elders speak of the past, their voices low and rhythmic, telling of ancestors who faced storms fiercer than this, of hunters who wrestled with lions and lived to tell the tale. Children listen wide-eyed, their imaginations painting pictures across the flames. And then comes laughter again. Someone mimics the awkward run of a hyena, another claps in rhythm, and soon the group is singing, their voices rising into the night. You realize in this moment that even here, in the raw heart of survival, there is space for joy, for art, for expression. Life is not only hunger and fear, it is also laughter echoing beneath the stars, hands drumming on hollow logs, voices weaving through the dark. You feel yourself drawn into it, as if sitting there by the fire, the crackle warm on your skin, the night vast and alive around you. And you understand something profound. This is not merely endurance. This is the first form of civilization, born not in cities, not in stone, but in shared meals, shared songs, shared survival. The storm is gone, but its memory lingers, and tomorrow will bring new challenges. Yet tonight, under the brilliant stars of Africa, the people rest in unity, fragile but unbroken. Morning breaks differently after a night of calm. The sky is pale, washed clean by the storm of the day before, and the horizon glows softly as the sun lifts itself once more into the endless blue. Birds call in every direction, their songs brighter, sharper, as if celebrating survival too. Dew clings to the grass, glistening like beads of glass, and every step through the plain shakes droplets loose, leaving the skin damp. The people rise slowly, stretching limbs stiff from sleeping on damp ground. The fire has burned low, and embers glow faintly, coaxed back to life with careful breaths and handfuls of dry twigs. It takes patience, and patience is something they have in abundance. Soon smoke curls upward, thin and gray, carrying with it the scent of charred wood. Breakfast is simple. Roasted roots, scraps of meat saved from yesterday's hunt, a handful of nuts cracked open with stones. Nothing is ever extravagant. Nothing is ever wasted. Children chew quickly, eager to run into the grass once more, their laughter spilling out as they chase one another between the huts of woven reeds. Their games are simple, throwing sticks, racing across mud, imitating the movements of hunters, but their importance is immense. Every game is training, every laugh a rehearsal for survival. When they mimic the stalking of an antelope or the crouch of a lion, they are not merely playing. They are preparing for the lives that await them, for the duties they cannot escape. The elders watch with eyes both stern and kind. They have seen too many children lost to accidents, sickness, hunger. To see these young ones running freely is both a joy and a warning, for joy here is fragile. You may wonder how one can live constantly beneath such a shadow, yet here it is accepted. Life is short, and because of that, every laugh is more valuable, every smile more sacred. By mid-morning, a group prepares to travel farther than usual. The storm has shifted the land, and there are rumors of herds moving closer to the river. Men and women gather together, carrying spears, baskets, and slings. Some tie bundles of food to their backs. Others smear fresh layers of clay on their skin to protect against the heat. The journey will be long, and no one can afford to go unprepared. The younger ones linger at the edge of the camp, envious of those chosen to leave, dreaming of the day when they too will walk into the grass not as children but as providers. The path they follow is no path at all, just a memory of where others have walked before. Feet press the earth, bending stalks of grass, leaving faint trails that only the skilled can read. Every bend of a blade, every patch of disturbed soil tells a story, if you know how to listen. To you, it would look like nothing but chaos, a sea of green. To them, it is as clear as ink on parchment. As they move, they speak little. Words are used sparingly on the trail, for voices carry, and sound is both ally and enemy. Instead, they signal with hands, with the flick of a wrist, the tilt of a chin. You would find it difficult to keep silent for hours, but here, silence is the language of survival. At a shallow stream, they pause to drink. The water is cloudy, stirred up by the storm, and each sip is taken with care. Women scoop it into gourds lined with leaves, straining the worst of the dirt. It is not clean by your standards. No filters, no boiling, no chlorine. Yet it is life, and they trust the earth to sustain them. Illness sometimes follows, yes, but thirst is the greater enemy, and thirst cannot be ignored. On the other side of the stream, the group encounters tracks. Large, deep, pressed into the soft mud. Elephant. The ground still trembles faintly from their passing. The people kneel to inspect, running their fingers along the edges of the prints, gauging direction and time. Elephants are not prey, not for this small band, but they are teachers of the land. Where elephants walk, water is near. Where elephants linger, fruiting trees may grow. To follow them is to follow wisdom. Yet elephants are also danger. A startled herd can trample hunters, crush huts, flatten entire clearings. The people know to keep their distance, to respect the giant's path. And so they turn slightly, adjusting their course, seeking the places where the herd has fed. Broken branches reveal fruit trees heavy with figs, and baskets are soon filled with sweet, sticky globes. Juice runs down their chins as they eat greedily, laughter breaking through their silence at last. Fruit is a gift, rare and treasured, a reminder that the earth does not only take, sometimes it gives freely. The day grows hotter, and the group rests beneath the shade of a tree. Their stories emerge, whispered to pass the time. One man tells of a leopard he saw in the branches above a trail, so still that it seemed carved from stone until its tail flicked once. Another laughs at the memory of falling asleep in the grass only to wake with a warthog sniffing at his feet. These are not exaggerations, not tall tales to amuse. These are lessons, reminders of the dangers that wait in silence. For every smile, there is a warning behind it. Back at camp, those who stayed behind work just as hard. Women strip fibers from plants, twisting them into ropes and cords. Men repair spears with new tips of bone. Children are sent to gather firewood, their small arms dragging branches back with effort. Smoke rises from the cooking pit, where the last of the antelope is stewing with herbs. The scent drifts far across the plain, both comforting and dangerous, for every predator knows the smell of meat as well as humans do. As evening falls, the foragers return, their baskets heavy, their faces flushed with success. Figs are shared, passed hand to hand, children squealing at the sweetness. Tonight, the meal is rich, varied, abundant by their standards. Roots roasted in the fire, meat still tender, fruit sticky and bright. A feast, though you would see it as a simple supper. But here, abundance is not measured in courses, but in survival. The stars rise again, sharp and endless above. The night sounds return, the shrill cries of insects, the low growl of distant predators, the gentle crackle of fire. And once more, voices gather in song. This time, the rhythm is stronger, fueled by the sweetness of figs and the strength of meat. Drums beat against the earth, hands clap, feet stamp. Children dance wildly, their shadows flickering on the fire-lit ground. Elders smile, remembering their own youth, when they too danced until their legs gave way. You realize, as you listen, that joy is not a luxury here. It is a weapon as sharp as any spear. Against hunger, against fear, against the endless uncertainty of tomorrow, joy is the shield that keeps the people whole. Without it, they would crumble. With it, they endure. And as the song rises higher into the night, echoing beneath the vast African sky, you understand. Survival here is not only about food and water, it is about spirit. And that spirit, fierce and fragile, burns as brightly as the fire that lights their faces. The fire burns low once again, and one by one the songs fade into murmurs, then into silence. A child leans against her mother's shoulder, her eyelids heavy, and soon her soft breathing blends with the rustle of the grass. Men lie back on the ground, staring upward, tracing the familiar maps of the stars with their fingers as though touching the sky itself. For them, the constellations are not just distant suns but guides, companions, and guardians. Each cluster holds a meaning, a story passed down for countless generations, carried on voices long gone yet still alive in memory. One star marks the season when rains will come, another shows the path of migration for the great herds, and yet another warns of hunger if it fades too early. You might see scattered lights, distant and indifferent, but to these people the sky is a library written in fire. It tells them where to go, when to prepare, and what dangers to expect. Even as their eyes close, they carry those maps within them, written not on parchment but in memory itself. Morning comes quickly, the horizon blushes pink, and a faint mist curls low across the plain. The air is cool, almost sweet, and for a brief moment the heat of day is forgotten. But the peace does not last. From the east, a sound rolls across the land. The drumming of hooves, heavy and steady, shaking the earth. The people rise in alarm, but not in fear. The sound is a promise. Over the ridge they appear, wildebeest, their dark forms moving in a tide of muscle and dust. The herd stretches farther than the eye can see, thousands of animals flowing like a river. The ground trembles beneath their weight, and the air fills with the sharp scent of their sweat. It is both beautiful and terrifying, a reminder of the raw power of the land. The people know this moment is rare, precious, and dangerous. The hunters prepare quickly. Spears are checked, slings are readied, and strategies whispered. They do not aim to bring down many, just one, maybe two. Too many would spoil before it could be eaten. But even taking one is no small task. The herd is cautious, and panic spreads quickly among them. A wrong move, and the animals will stampede, leaving nothing but trampled earth and shattered bodies behind. They move with precision, fanning out to the edges, creeping low in the tall grass. Children and elders remain behind, their eyes fixed on the hunters, waiting, hoping. The leader raises his hand, a silent signal, and time seems to slow. Dust swirls, hooves thunder, muscles tense. Then the moment comes. A single wildebeest strays, separated from the herd. The hunters strike. Spears flash through the air. Slings release stones with sharp cracks. The animal stumbles, rises again, its eyes wild, its breath sharp and loud. Another spear strikes, sinking deep, and at last the beast falls, its legs folding beneath it. The herd surges away, the thunder of hooves retreating into the horizon, leaving behind silence and the heavy weight of victory. The hunters waste no time. Knives of bone and stone are drawn, skin split with practiced efficiency. Blood stains the earth, steaming in the morning air. Every part of the animal is claimed. Meat carved and packed, hide stripped, sinew pulled free for bowstrings and cord. Even the bones will be taken, shaped into tools, awls, or ornaments. Nothing is wasted, for waste is death. At the camp, the news is greeted with cries of joy. Children run to meet the hunters, eyes wide at the sight of meat glistening red in the sun. Women prepare the fire, piling wood high, ready for the feast. Smoke rises once more, thick and rich, carrying the scent of life renewed. For tonight, no one will go hungry. As the meat roasts, voices fill the air. Songs of thanks, low and rhythmic, weave with the crackle of fire. The children dance again, mimicking the chase, pretending to be hunters themselves, spears of sticks clutched in their hands. Laughter rings out, but beneath it all is something deeper, a recognition of the sacrifice. The animal spirit is honored, its life acknowledged, its gift never taken for granted. Later, as the feast begins, you notice how carefully they divide the portions. Elders are served first, then the hunters, then women and children. This is not favoritism but survival. Elders carry knowledge, hunters provide food, and without either, the group cannot endure. Children too are given special pieces, for they are the future, the fragile flame that must be protected at all costs. Around the fire, stories flow more freely now, fueled by the richness of meat. One elder speaks of the time when her people followed herds for weeks across the plains, walking until their feet bled, sleeping on hard earth beneath the open sky. Another recalls a hunt where a lion stole their prize, dragging it into the grass before they could reach it. They laugh at the memory now, though at the time it meant days of hunger. These stories are not just entertainment. They are lessons hidden in laughter, warnings wrapped in memory. The night grows loud with celebration, but beyond the circle of fire, shadows stir. Hyenas gather, their eyes glinting yellow in the darkness, their laughter sharp and cruel. They wait at the edges, drawn by the scent of meat, their patience stretched thin. The people know this, and the fire is kept high, spears kept close. Hyenas are thieves, bold and clever, and they will strike if given the chance. But tonight, the people are strong, united, and the fire is fierce. The predators keep their distance. When the songs finally fade and the fire burns low, a silence falls over the camp, deep and heavy. The hunters lie down with tired bodies. The children curl against their mothers, and the elders close their eyes, dreaming of hunts long past. Above, the stars burn steady, eternal witnesses to the fragile triumph of life. It is in this silence, between the last ember and the first light of dawn, that the truth of survival reveals itself. It is not the strength of the spear, nor the sharpness of the knife, that sustains them. It is their togetherness, their unbroken chain of stories, songs, and memories. Alone, no one could endure this land. Together, they carve life from stone, grass, and blood. And as the night deepens, as the predators circle unseen and the sky stretches infinite, you realize once more why you would not last a single day here. The dangers are constant, the rewards fleeting, and the balance between life and death is as thin as the edge of a blade. Yet for them, it is not horror. It is simply life. The morning after the feast is quiet in its own strange way. The camp stirs slowly, and though the air is heavy with the smell of charred wood and smoke, the people rise with a kind of satisfaction that comes only after hunger has been silenced. Children chase each other between the ashes of the dying fire, laughter carrying across the plain. The hunters sit apart, sharpening their spears once again, already preparing for the next hunt. For they know too well that a single meal does not last long in this world. The hide of the wildebeest, stretched on wooden stakes, begins to dry in the sun. A woman rubs it carefully with ashen fat, kneading it until her hands ache, softening the fibers so it can be used as clothing, shelter, or bedding. Another tends to strips of meat hung high in the branches of a tree, smoke curling up around them to keep insects and scavengers away. Already the work of survival begins again, for every victory carries with it the demand to be transformed into the tools of tomorrow. But today is not only about work. It is also a day of travel. The herds have moved on, and with them, the rhythm of life shifts. The people gather their belongings, bundling hides, tools, and food into woven carriers. Children help as best they can, carrying small loads, proud to be part of the movement. The older ones know the journey will not be easy, but they follow without complaint. Complaints are wasted energy, and energy is life. They set out across the plain, the sun already climbing high, the earth shimmering with heat. Each step stirs dust, clinging to skin, sticking to sweat. The horizon seems endless, the land unbroken. Yet they know the landmarks invisible to you. A particular tree bent by wind, a boulder shaped like an animal's back, the faint line of a riverbed. They all mark the way forward. Without them, you would wander in circles until the sun burned you dry. By midday, the heat is nearly unbearable. The air wavers, bending the light, making the horizon ripple as though it were water. Thirst presses hard, but the people press harder. They know that ahead lies a place of shade, a scatter of rocks that hides a spring. It is not much, just a trickle of water seeping from the earth, but it is enough. They have followed this path many times, and memory carries them forward when exhaustion would otherwise consume them. Finally, they reach it. The spring glistens faintly between the rocks, the water cool, tasting of stone and soil. They kneel in turn, cupping their hands, letting the liquid wash through cracked lips. Even the children wait patiently, for they know the value of order when survival is at stake. The water is shared not in greed but in balance, each sip measured against the needs of the group. When thirst is eased, they rest in the shade of the rocks. The hunters scan the horizon, eyes sharp for movement. Women weave reeds into cords, their fingers moving swiftly, creating what will later become baskets or fishing traps. Children nap, their small bodies curled like animals in the dust. The world beyond is harsh and endless, but within this circle of shade, there is peace. As evening approaches, the sky turns gold and the air cools. The people move again, guided now by the stars that begin to emerge, faint pinpricks of light against the darkening blue. They will travel through the night when the heat is less and when predators are easier to hear and see. The rhythm of their footsteps becomes a song, a steady beat against the earth, carrying them forward as one body. During the march, stories are told once more, not around a fire this time, but in whispers that weave through the line. A man tells of the first river he remembers as a child, wide and filled with fish so plentiful they leapt from the water without nets. A woman recalls her mother's voice singing her awake during a storm, promising that thunder was only the sky laughing. These fragments drift like sparks, keeping minds alive as bodies grow tired. And yet, danger is never far. In the darkness, the roar of a lion echoes faintly, low and rumbling. The group halts instantly, spears raised, eyes searching. The sound comes again, closer this time, vibrating through the ground. The children are ushered into the center of the group, the elders forming a ring around them. For a moment the air is still, heavy with tension. Then, from the ridge above, a lioness appears, her body sleek and powerful, eyes glowing in the starlight. She watches, silent, calculating. The hunters grip their spears tighter, though they know to strike would be dangerous. The lioness is not alone. There are more hidden in the grass, waiting. The people do not run. To run is death. Instead they raise their voices, shouting, clapping stones together, waving firebrands lit hastily from dry grass. The noise grows into a wall, and the lioness, after a long pause, slips back into the night, her pride retreating with her. The people exhale as one, their steps resuming, but every sense remains sharpened. By dawn, they reach the banks of a wide river. Mist clings low to the surface, and the air is filled with the croaks of frogs and the calls of birds. This is no quiet spring. It is a living vein of water, cutting through the land, offering both life and danger. The hunters kneel to study the tracks at the edge: elephant, buffalo, antelope, and deeper grooves carved by the dragging tails of crocodiles. The river is both blessing and curse. The people will camp here for some time, for the river offers more than water. It gives fish, reeds for weaving, clay for shaping, and animals that come to drink. But it demands caution. No one enters the water without watchful eyes, for crocodiles lurk unseen, patient and ancient. Even lions and leopards come to the banks, drawn by the same promise of life. To live here requires vigilance every moment, a constant awareness that a mistake means death. That night, as the fire burns high by the river's edge, the people sit in a wide circle. Songs are softer now, carried by the gentle rush of water. The children are told of spirits that live in the river, guardians that must be respected with offerings of grain or meat. To anger them, the elders say, is to invite floods, droughts, or worse. Whether true or not, the warning ensures care, and care ensures survival. The flames flicker, shadows dance across the faces, and once again you see the pattern. It is not merely food, water, or fire that keeps them alive. It is memory, story, ritual. These are the invisible walls that hold back chaos. Without them, each danger would come like a wave, unstoppable, drowning them in fear. With them, every step becomes part of a rhythm older than any one life, a rhythm that carries them forward into another day. And as you watch them close their eyes, the fire dimming, the river whispering nearby, you cannot help but feel how fragile and yet how powerful they are. Fragile because the land could claim them in an instant. Powerful because, together, they endure. The river is both a gift and a challenge, and in the days that follow, the people begin to settle along its banks, building temporary shelters of branches and hides. The sound of running water becomes the constant backdrop to their lives, soft yet powerful, a reminder that everything here is both fleeting and eternal. The shelters are simple but strong, angled against the wind, layered with grasses that keep out the cold night air. Inside, families curl together, warmth shared body to body, while outside the fire burns low, guarded always by one who does not sleep. At dawn, the hunters rise. They are quiet, their movements smooth as they gather their spears and bows. The river attracts life, and with life comes opportunity. Tracks in the mud show antelope had come in the night to drink, and perhaps they will return with the morning sun. The hunters smear their bodies with ash to dull their scent, crouching low in the reeds, waiting with the patience of stone. Every sense is sharpened. The faint ripple of water, the distant bellow of hippos, the buzz of insects that never ceases. When a small herd approaches, slender legs moving carefully over the muddy bank, the hunters signal to each other with the flick of a hand. They remain still until the moment is perfect. Then the spears fly. The air shatters with the cries of the startled animals, one collapsing into the mud while the rest scatter. The struggle is quick, the kill clean, and once again the hunter's discipline has provided life for the group. The women and children come soon after, carrying baskets woven from reeds, sharp stone tools at their sides. They work quickly to butcher the animal, stripping meat, gathering bones, saving every piece. Even the stomach is opened carefully, for within it lie half-digested plants that can be dried and used as fodder for fire. Nothing is wasted. In this place, waste is unthinkable. Yet food from the river is not only found on land. Fishing is another craft, delicate and clever. Baskets are shaped with narrow throats so that fish can enter but not escape, baited with crushed insects or grain. Children wade into the shallows, splashing to drive the fish into the traps, laughing as their baskets grow heavy with silver bodies. The catch is small, but combined with the meat of the hunt, it strengthens the camp. At night, the fish are roasted whole, skin crisp, bones brittle enough to eat. The taste is sharp, earthy, flavored by the smoke of the fire and the river itself. Clay is gathered from the muddy banks, cool and sticky, pressed between fingers into shapes. The women mold it into small vessels, smoothing the surfaces with wet hands, then setting them to dry in the sun. These simple pots will harden enough to carry water, or to store seeds, or to hold berries crushed into paste. They are fragile, easily broken, yet they mark another step forward, another layer of knowledge passed from generation to generation. But the river is not only life. It is also danger. At dusk, when the water glows orange with the last light of day, the deep bellow of hippos shakes the air. Their massive bodies rise from the surface like islands of muscle and tusk. Though they eat only plants, they are feared, for their strength is unmatched, and their tempers wild. The people keep their distance, warning the children never to approach, never to linger too close to the reeds where shadows shift. Crocodiles, too, wait just beneath the surface. Their eyes float like pebbles, their bodies still as driftwood. They strike without warning, jaws closing with the power to break bone. One afternoon, a young boy reaches too far for water and nearly vanishes in a sudden churn of spray and blood. Only the swift hand of his father, pulling him back with a shout, saves him from being dragged under. The camp is shaken, the warning spoken again. The river gives, but it also takes. Respect is the only protection. In the evenings, when the dangers recede into the dark, the people gather as always around the fire. The flames rise high, painting their faces in red and gold, and the stories continue. Tonight, an elder tells of a time long before, when the river was said to be wider than the land itself, a sea that swallowed everything. She speaks of great fish larger than houses, of storms that turned the water black, of ancestors who survived by building rafts from trees and letting the current carry them. Whether the story is true or only myth, the children's eyes grow wide, and the lesson is clear. The river is vast, older than memory, and to live by it is to live within its rules. Music follows the stories. A rhythm is beaten on hollow logs, hands slapping in patterns that echo the heartbeat of the earth. Voices rise, chanting in unison, the sound carrying across the water. Some dance, feet stamping in time, bodies swaying like reeds in the wind. It is not only celebration but survival, for these rhythms bind the group, remind them they are one body, one spirit, moving together through the hardships of the world. As night deepens, the fire burns lower, sparks lifting into the sky like stars. The hunters sharpen their spears again, for tomorrow will bring new challenges. The women finish weaving their baskets, setting them aside with quiet satisfaction. The children fall asleep in the warmth of their mother's arms, their dreams filled with rivers, fish, and creatures both real and imagined. And as you watch, it becomes clear why you would not last a day here. The river alone would test every instinct, demanding constant attention, punishing even the smallest mistake. To survive requires not only strength but awareness, patience, and knowledge handed down in whispers and songs. The people live with danger at their doorstep every hour, yet they endure, shaping their world one careful choice at a time. By morning, mist clings once more to the water. The sun rises, painting the surface gold, and the cycle begins again. The river waits, alive and eternal, as the people step forward into another day of struggle, another day of survival, another day of life carved from the edge of death. The river had given much, but it had also revealed another truth. This place was not empty. Beyond the bend, where the water split into narrow streams and the reeds grew thick, there were others. At first it was only a rumor, carried by a young hunter who claimed to have seen smoke rising from the distance. Then it was confirmed by footprints found in the mud, larger than those of the people here, pressed deep by strangers who walked with purpose. The camp grew restless. Strangers could mean danger, or they could mean knowledge. Both possibilities lingered like shadows. Days passed, and the elders decided. They would send a small group downstream, carrying gifts. A bundle of dried meat, a woven basket, and a necklace strung with shells gathered from far inland. The gesture was simple, but it was meant to speak without words. We are not your enemy. We come with open hands. The journey was tense. The river was narrow here, hemmed by walls of papyrus taller than a man. The air filled with the cry of birds and the whine of insects. Each sound seemed sharper, each movement in the reeds a reminder that danger could spring at any moment. When at last the group emerged into a clearing, they saw the strangers waiting. The people of this new camp were taller, their skin marked with white ash patterns that streaked across chest and arms. Their hair was bound with strips of leather, their spears long and tipped with gleaming stone. They did not speak at first. They only watched, eyes steady, as if weighing the worth of those who had come to them. The eldest of the visiting group stepped forward, placing the basket on the ground between them. Silence hung heavy, broken only by the call of a heron overhead. Finally, one of the strangers moved. He stepped forward, not hostile but slow, deliberate. He placed a carved bone dagger beside the basket, then stepped back. The exchange was done. It was a ritual older than memory. The first offering, the first acknowledgement. A line drawn not in blood but in trust. The tension eased, and gestures replaced words. Hands pointed to the river, to the sky, to the land. Simple signs carried meaning: water, food, danger, friend. Slowly, the groups began to understand each other. The visitors returned to their own camp, carrying the bone dagger as a sign of peace. That night, the fire burned brighter than usual, the air filled with speculation. Who were these people? What did they eat? What did they believe? How did they survive? The questions carried excitement but also caution. Allies could be powerful, but they could just as easily turn to rivals. In the following days, contact grew. Hunters from both camps crossed paths at the river, sometimes sharing space in silence, sometimes exchanging small things. A sharpened flint for a bundle of dried berries, a skin of water for a strip of roasted meat. The exchanges were small, but each one built another thread in a fragile web of trust. And with that trust came stories. The strangers told of lands farther south, where the earth cracked in the heat and the grass grew taller than a man. They spoke of animals that towered above the trees, creatures with long necks and spotted hides who moved like shadows at dusk. They told of great storms that swept across the plains, turning the sky black, and of fires that raced through the dry grass faster than a man could run. The people listened, wide-eyed, for these were things they had never seen. In return, they spoke of the highlands they had left behind, of stones that cracked into sharp blades, of caves where echoes carried voices like spirits. Stories passed between them like fire, warming the imagination, reminding everyone that the world was far larger than the stretch of river they knew. Yet not all was easy. Tensions flared when hunting paths overlapped, when two spears were thrown at the same antelope, when traps caught fish on both sides of the reeds. There were arguments, sharp words and voices neither side fully understood, gestures that bordered on threats. More than once, spears were lifted, only to be lowered again with deliberate calm. The fragile balance trembled, but it did not break. To ease the tension, a ritual was proposed. One evening, the strangers invited the people to their camp, where a great fire had been lit. Around it, dancers painted in ash moved in circles, stamping their feet to the beat of hollow drums. The rhythm was deep, pulsing, like the heart of the earth. The visitors were invited to join, and though hesitant at first, they stepped into the circle. Feet pounded the ground, voices rose in chants that carried across the river. In that moment, strangers became something more, partners in survival, bound not by blood but by rhythm and fire. From then on, the two groups found ways to share. One side taught how to weave tighter baskets that could hold even the smallest grains. The other showed how to set nets across the narrow channels of the river, catching fish in greater numbers. Knowledge flowed like water, crossing boundaries, reshaping lives. But with sharing came whispers. The strangers spoke of distant raids, of people who did not come with gifts but with fire, taking food, taking lives, vanishing before dawn. They warned that peace was fragile, that the river might one day carry more than fish and stories. It might carry enemies. The warning settled heavy in the minds of all who heard it. That night, as the fire burned low, the people sat in silence. The children slept, the hunters sharpened their spears, and the women repaired baskets with hands that moved slower than usual. For the first time, the river seemed less like a gift and more like a path, one that could bring friends but also danger beyond imagining. You see, this is why life here was so impossible for someone unprepared. It was never just the hunt, never just the heat, never just the river. It was the constant balance, the endless weight of decisions that could mean survival or ruin. Trust had to be given, but not too quickly. Strength had to be shown, but never too much. Every day was not only survival against the earth itself, but against the unseen, the unknown, the other. And so, the people slept uneasily, knowing that the world beyond the firelight was wider and darker than they had imagined, and that the strangers at the bend of the river were only the beginning. The night after the warning from the strangers, the camp changed. It was subtle, almost invisible at first, but you could feel it in the way the hunters lingered longer by the fire, in the way the elders spoke in lower tones, and in how every sound from the reeds seemed sharper than before. The children still laughed, the women still wove, but there was an unease underneath, like a shadow stretching across the ground long before the sun sets. The elders gathered the people and made a decision. They would strengthen the camp. Fires would no longer be scattered. Instead, they would be placed in a ring at night, small but steady, to form a circle of light around the heart of the group. Spears would be sharpened each evening and placed within reach of every sleeping place. Even the young boys who were not yet strong enough to hunt were given wooden clubs, not to fight with, but to hold, so their hands would remember the weight of defense. The ritual of the fire ring became more than just safety. It became a ceremony. As the flames were lit one by one, each family placed a token in the embers. A small piece of bark, a feather, or a dried berry, as if feeding not just the fire but the spirit of the circle itself. The elders said that a strong fire, fed by many hands, could keep more than animals away. It could confuse wandering spirits, blind jealous ancestors, and even keep enemies hesitant at the edge of the dark. Still, the threat of strangers lingered. The ones they had met by the river seemed honest, but the whispers of raiders had lodged themselves like thorns. No one could forget them. At night, dreams carried images of fire sweeping through grass, of figures rushing through the reeds with painted faces, of cries that split the darkness. People woke breathless, clutching their mats, ears straining for sounds that weren't there. The hunters took it upon themselves to test the land. They set out at dawn, moving in pairs, following trails farther than before. They watched for smoke, for broken branches, for footprints that were not their own. Sometimes they found nothing but silence. Other times they returned with news. A tree stripped of bark by hands, a fire pit still warm, a path cut through the tall grass by more than animals. Signs that others were near, always near. One day, one of the hunters returned with something far more troubling. In his hand, he carried an arrow. The shaft was straight, polished smooth, the point made of sharpened bone tied with sinew. It was not theirs. It was not from the group by the river either. This was something new. The camp fell silent as the arrow was passed from hand to hand. Everyone studied it, as if it might whisper its secrets, but all it revealed was a fact too heavy to ignore. Someone else was watching. The elders spoke long into the night. Some said they should move, abandon the river, and return to the highlands. Others argued that leaving would mean weakness, that to retreat would invite pursuit. A third voice said they should strike first, find these unseen people before they themselves were found. The debate circled like vultures over carrion, never settling. And yet, through the tension, life pressed on. Food still had to be gathered. Children still needed to be taught. Songs still rose in the evenings, though softer, more careful, as if the people were afraid that singing too loudly would carry across the water. The balance of life and fear was delicate, but it was kept. To strengthen the spirit of the camp, the shaman prepared a ritual unlike any before. At dusk, he took red clay from the riverbank and mixed it with ash from the oldest fire pit. With this, he painted lines on the faces of the people, sharp streaks across cheeks and foreheads, marks of vigilance. He told them the clay would make their eyes keener, their ears sharper, their courage harder. It was not the clay itself but the belief, the shared act of being marked, that gave strength. That night, under the glow of the fire ring, they danced. Not for celebration, but for protection. Feet pounded the earth in heavy rhythm, as if stamping warning into the ground itself. We are here, we are strong, do not come. The air filled with the beat of hollow drums, with chants that rolled like thunder. The children mimicked the steps, wide-eyed, learning not just the movements but the meaning behind them. It was not joy, it was defiance. The next day, hunters once again followed the trails, and this time they saw smoke. Thin, distant, curling into the sky like a finger. They did not go closer. They returned, breathless, to tell the others. The elders listened, silent, their faces carved with worry. The camp was not alone. The stories had been true. Beyond the bend of the river, beyond the reeds, beyond what they could see, others had already laid claim to this land. And now each sound in the night carried more weight. The snapping of a branch, the call of an owl, the splash of water against the bank. Was it just the forest? Or was it a warning? Was someone out there watching the fire ring, studying the people inside it? The mind could twist every noise into a threat. Sleep came slower, and when it did, it was restless, filled with dreams of running, of hiding, of fighting shadows that never revealed themselves. You would not have lasted here, not even a single night. Not because of the hunger, not because of the beasts, but because of the constant awareness that someone unseen might be near. The weight of uncertainty, the gnawing thought that peace could end with a single cry in the dark, that was heavier than any spear. The elders knew it too, and so they began to plan, not for the hunt, not for the harvest, but for the unthinkable. The day when the fire ring might not be enough. The first meeting did not come with war drums, nor with burning reeds, nor even with shouted warnings across the river. It came instead in silence, in the still heat of late afternoon, when the hunters were out in the grassland chasing the tracks of an antelope. They moved quietly, stepping where the prints led them, ears tuned to every rustle, every faint snap of stalks. The animal was close, its hooves fresh upon the earth. They were certain they would catch sight of it soon. But when the grass parted, it was not antelope that stood in the clearing. It was men. 4 of them, tall, lean, their skin the same shade as the earth itself, their hair bound tight, their bodies painted with streaks of ash and ochre. They carried spears tipped with stone and shields of hide, round and heavy. They stood still, staring at the hunters, and for a long, tense moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. The hunters gripped their own weapons, not raising them but not lowering them either. The strangers did the same. No one moved, as though even the wind dared not disturb the balance between them. The only sound was the buzzing of insects and the faint shifting of grass. It was one of the strangers who finally broke the silence. He tapped the ground with the butt of his spear and lifted his free hand, palm open. A sign of no harm, a gesture that might have meant peace or might have been a trick. The hunters exchanged a glance, hearts pounding, and one of them mirrored the gesture. The strangers spoke then, their words harsh and sharp, the rhythm unfamiliar. It was a language that twisted differently on the tongue than the one the hunters knew. Yet a few sounds carried meaning. Names for water, names for land, perhaps even a warning. The hunters answered back in their own tongue, slow, careful, knowing it would not be understood but hoping the tone would carry across. The 2 groups stood facing one another for what felt like an eternity, until the strangers, without another word, turned and vanished into the tall grass, leaving only trampled earth where they had stood. The hunters did not chase them. They returned to camp, breathless, the story tumbling out of their mouths as the people gathered. The reaction was immediate. The children were pulled close. Spears were gathered. The fire ring was lit earlier than usual, flames higher, brighter. And that night no one sang. The silence of the camp was heavy, as if even voices could draw danger closer. The elders debated once again, and this time the air was sharper, edged with fear. One elder, his hair white with age, said this was a test, that the strangers had come to measure the people, to weigh their strength, and that the camp must prepare for what might follow. Another elder said it was a chance for alliance, that not all meetings need end with blood, that the earth was wide enough for more than one people. A third voice, younger, louder, said peace was a fool's dream, that the arrow they had found was proof enough. The shaman listened to them all and then spoke last. He told them that spirits did not bring 2 groups together without reason. He said the stranger's appearance was like the rising of a storm cloud. It could bring rain for crops, or it could bring lightning that split trees, but it would come whether they wished it or not. And so the people must be ready, not just with spears, but with hearts steady enough not to break when the storm arrived. From that day, the hunters were never sent alone. They moved in groups of 6, eyes scanning every horizon, listening for movement that did not belong. Women gathering roots or fruit took younger boys as runners, to carry word back if they saw danger. Even at the river, where once laughter had filled the air as people bathed, voices grew hushed, watchful. The world had changed, and yet life could not be put aside. The rains had begun to build, dark clouds pressing against the sky, and with them came the urgency of storing food. Wild yams were dug up and dried in the sun. Fish were smoked until hard as stone. Berries were mashed into thick paste to last the season. Each task carried the rhythm of necessity, but each was now edged with caution. At night, when the fire circle burned high, the shaman taught the children chants that were old, older than even the elders remembered. Words meant to confuse wandering enemies, words meant to make the mind strong. He told them that the voice itself was a weapon, that fear could be driven away not only with spears but with sound. The children repeated after him, their small voices rising against the dark. Then, one evening, the watchers at the edge of the camp saw smoke again, closer this time, its column rising like a dark spear into the sky. The people knew then that the strangers were not just passing. They were here. They were building. They were watching just as the camp was watching them. Sleep that night was thin. Dreams came quick and sharp, filled with images of faces painted in ash, of spears glinting in the firelight, of rivers running red. But woven into those dreams was something else too, the question of choice. Would they meet again in peace, or would the earth soon shake with the sound of war cries? You would not have lasted here, not even a single sunset, because every shadow, every distant sound, every rising wisp of smoke carried not just danger but decision. And to live in such a place meant living with the weight of choices that might decide whether your people would endure or vanish into silence. The next encounter came not by accident, but by intent. For days after the smoke was seen, the camp watched carefully, waiting for the strangers to appear again, yet none came. The hunters reported hearing movements in the tall grass, and once, in the distance, a horn sounded, a long, low note that carried far on the air. It was not the call of any animal they knew. It was human. It was a signal. The elders argued over what must be done. Some said they should move camp, that the strangers were too close, that the land was wide and they could find safety elsewhere. Others said leaving was weakness, that to abandon their ground without struggle was to invite pursuit, and that no people could run forever. The shaman, as always, spoke with calm, his voice carrying through the fire circle. He said, "If they are building near us, then they will come. If they do not come, we will meet them anyway, because to remain in silence is to let fear grow roots inside us. Better to face them beneath the sun, where eyes can see, than to wait and dream shadows in the night." And so a decision was made. A small group would go, not with spears raised, but with offerings in hand. It was a dangerous gamble, for to walk toward the unknown without full defense was to risk everything. But to never attempt was to live in suspicion until suspicion itself became poison. At dawn, 3 elders, the shaman, and 2 hunters prepared to leave. They carried no shields, only spears to walk with, and on their backs they bore gifts: dried fish, smoked strips of meat, a woven mat made by the women of the camp, and a necklace strung with beads carved from bone. These were not just food and trinkets. They were tokens, signs of willingness to open hand instead of closing fist. The walk to the smoke took hours. The sun burned hotter with each step, pressing against their shoulders, pulling sweat down their spines. The grass rose high, whispering against their legs, but they did not turn back. At last they came to a clearing where the land dipped, and there it was, the strangers' camp. It was smaller than their own, but tightly built. Huts of wood and grass stood in a neat circle, with spears planted upright at the entrance. Men moved about, their bodies streaked with paint, their weapons always near. Women sat grinding seeds into meal. Children darted between huts like birds. It was a mirror of their own lives, yet different enough to remind them that these were not kin. When the strangers saw them, shouts went up. Spears were lifted, shields raised, but no one attacked. The 6 from the camp stopped at the edge of the clearing and lowered their gifts to the ground. Then the shaman stepped forward, lifted his hands, and spoke words in his own tongue, slow and clear, his voice strong but steady. He knew they would not understand the language, but meaning could live in the body, in the eyes, in the sound of a tone. The strangers murmured to one another. Their leader came forward then, taller than the rest, with a scar that ran from his cheek down his neck. He carried a spear with a tip sharp as obsidian, and his eyes measured every movement of the visitors. For a long moment he said nothing, only studied them. Then he barked a command, and 2 of his people stepped forward, laying down their own offerings. A small bundle of dried roots, a pouch of red earth pigment, and a bracelet woven from twisted grass. It was a reply, not surrender, not threat. A gesture returned. The tension in the air softened, though it did not vanish. The 2 groups did not move closer. They did not share food, nor did they touch hands. But they had exchanged gifts, and in that act lay the first thread of something fragile, something that could one day hold or break. The elders and the shaman turned back after that, leaving the gifts untouched until they were sure the strangers would take them. As they walked home, their hearts were heavy with questions. Was this peace, or was it only a trick to buy time before the storm came? That night, the camp gathered to hear what had happened. When the story was told, the children's eyes grew wide at the mention of the scarred leader, and the women whispered at the thought of gifts lying side by side. Some felt hope stir in them, others only deeper unease. For to know your enemy is one thing, but to know that your enemy is not wholly unlike you, that is harder still. The shaman warned them that gifts alone did not erase danger. He said the earth itself was watching, weighing how the people would act next. He told them that a bond could be like fire. It could warm or it could burn. The difference was in how it was tended. Days passed, and for a time there was no sign of the strangers. The hunters still heard movement in the grass, but no attacks came, no arrows flew. Yet the silence was not relief. It was a question waiting for answer. And then, just as the moon began to swell again, the answer came. One morning, the river showed a strange sight. Upon the bank lay a heap of fish, freshly caught, their scales still glistening in the sun. They had not been placed there by the camp, nor by any of their own people. Someone else had left them, someone who wanted them found. The people debated fiercely. Some said it was a gift, like the first offerings, a sign that the strangers wished to share the river. Others said it was bait, a trap, that to eat those fish was to invite sickness, poison, or curse. The children begged for the meat, their eyes wide with hunger, but the elders hesitated. In the end, the shaman took one fish himself. He roasted it over the fire, speaking old chants as the flames licked the skin. Then he ate it slowly with the whole camp watching. Hours passed. His body showed no weakness. Only then did the people dare to eat. And so for a brief moment the river was shared, not in words but in actions. Yet even in that sharing a shadow remained. For if the strangers had left gifts, it meant they knew the paths to the river. It meant they had walked close enough to touch the heart of the camp, unseen. Would you have lasted here, knowing that even when your hands held food, danger walked just behind you, hidden in the grass? Would you have slept at night, knowing unseen eyes watched the flames of your fire? The night after the fish were shared, the air in the camp felt heavy, as if even the stars above leaned closer to listen. Fires burned low, and the people sat in silence, each mind turning over the same thought. What did this gesture mean? Was it the beginning of friendship, or the mask of something deeper, a move in a game they did not yet understand? The children, innocent of the weight pressing on their elders, played near the fire until the mothers pulled them close. They did not see shadows the way the older eyes did, and so they laughed, their voices bright, a reminder that life went on even in the face of unease. But for the adults, there was little laughter. The elders argued quietly among themselves, some insisting that the strangers sought peace, others warning that such peace could be only temporary, a thin layer of calm over sharp teeth. The shaman watched all this in silence, his gaze moving from one face to another. When at last he spoke, his words were slow and measured, as though each syllable had to be weighed before it left his lips. "The land tests us," he said. "It places before us a path of thorn and flower, and we must choose which we walk. If we turn away, we will never know if the flower leads to fruit, or if the thorn hides poison. But to walk blindly is to bleed." That same night, as the flames began to die down and the people prepared to sleep, a sound came from beyond the grass. It was not the rustle of wind or the call of a night bird. It was rhythmic, deliberate, like hands striking hollow wood. A drumbeat. The camp stirred at once. Spears were seized, eyes sharpened. The hunters moved to the edge of the clearing, every sense straining. The sound came again. Low, steady, not fast, not frantic. A signal, a call. And then, faint but unmistakable, another sound joined it, voices. Not shouts of war, but song. Strange words in an unknown tongue rose and fell, weaving with the beat of the drum. It was a song both alien and oddly familiar. For though the words carried no meaning, the tone carried something older than words. A rhythm of life, of heartbeat, of breath. The people listened, frozen between fear and awe. Never had they heard strangers sing in the night. To sing was to bare your spirit, to offer part of yourself to the air, and to do so close to another people's camp was either madness or an invitation. The shaman lifted his hand, stilling those who would have rushed to silence the sound. "Do not break this moment," he whispered. "Listen." The song carried on for a time, then faded, leaving only the echo of the drum. And then silence again. The grass whispered, the river murmured, the stars blinked, but no more sound came. The people waited long after, but nothing followed. No attack, no approach. At last, one by one, they returned to their huts, but sleep did not come easily. The song lingered in their minds, strange and haunting, as though it had planted something in their chests. By morning, the shaman declared that this was no accident. He said the strangers wished to speak, not with hands, but with sound. And so he called upon the camp to answer. That night, when the fire was lit and the hunters returned with their kill, the people gathered once more. And when the stars appeared, they too began to sing. Their voices rose together, carrying words of their own tongue, words that told of rivers and sky, of ancestors and hunt, of the bond between earth and flesh. The song was old, taught from the first elders, a song that reminded them of who they were. The women's voices wove high, the men's deep tones rumbled beneath, and the children's laughter threaded through like bells. The grass swallowed their song, carrying it outward, and all waited to see if an answer would come. At first, only the night replied, but then, faint and distant, the beat of a drum returned. This time it joined them, finding their rhythm, matching their pace. It was not the same song, not the same tongue, but it flowed beside theirs like two rivers meeting. The people of the camp looked to one another, astonishment on their faces. This was not war. This was not silence. This was something new, fragile as a flame in the wind, but alive. For many nights after, the exchange continued. The strangers would sing, and the camp would answer. Sometimes the rhythms clashed. Sometimes they aligned so perfectly it felt as though both groups breathed the same breath. Slowly, the fear that once clung to every shadow loosened its grip, replaced by curiosity, by wonder. But curiosity is a dangerous thing. One evening, when the song was at its strongest, a young hunter broke from the circle. He was bold, restless, his spirit too hot to sit quietly. Without telling anyone, he slipped into the grass, moving toward the sound. His heart raced, not with fear, but with hunger to see the faces that matched the voices. Step by step, he crept closer, until at last he reached the edge of the clearing where the strangers sang. He saw them, their bodies painted red and white, their feet stamping in rhythm, their eyes closed in trance. Firelight flickered across their faces, and the drumbeat echoed in his bones. For a moment he forgot who he was, forgot the warnings of his people, and only stood transfixed by the beauty of it. But then one of the strangers opened his eyes. He saw the hunter. A shout rang out. Spears lifted. The song stopped. The young hunter fled, his legs carrying him through the grass faster than the wind. Arrows whistled past, but none struck. He burst back into camp, his chest heaving, his eyes wide with terror. "They saw me," he gasped. "They saw me." The shaman's face turned grim. The fragile thread of song had been pulled too tight. Now, none could say if it would hold or snap. And you, listening now, imagine yourself there, sitting by the fire, hearing that first silence after the song stopped. Would you have believed the strangers meant peace? Or would you have tightened your grip on your spear, waiting for the night to break open with war cries? The morning after the hunter's flight, the camp awoke to a tense hush. No one spoke louder than necessary, and even the children moved slowly, feeling the weight that had settled over the people like a low cloud. The fire ring burned weakly, as if reluctant to illuminate a day that might carry danger. The elders gathered quickly, faces etched with worry, for they knew the fragile thread of song had been broken. The strangers would no longer hear only voices, they would now see. The shaman, as always, was calm, though his eyes were sharp as flint. "Today we must meet them," he said, "for the air carries more than sound. It carries choice, and the choice now lies before us." His voice was steady, but beneath it lay the weight of the unknown. Meeting someone face to face was no longer an exchange of gifts, no longer a song. It was a test of courage, of judgment, and perhaps even of survival. This was a tall man with a scar running down the side of his face, much like the leader the hunters had glimpsed before. His eyes were sharp, and they moved like a predator sizing up prey. He did not take a gift immediately. Instead, he raised a hand in a gesture that mirrored the shaman's, and then slowly, with deliberate care, placed a small bundle on the ground. Inside were roots, twisted and dried, and a small pouch of red earth pigment. It was a response, simple yet profound. They had seen the approach and they acknowledged it. A tense silence followed. Both sides waited, watching the other, measuring the weight of every movement. Then, almost imperceptibly, the strangers relaxed slightly, and the shaman nodded to his group. One of the hunters stepped forward and touched a spear tipped to the earth, a traditional sign of respect, showing he bore no intent to strike. Another elder mimicked the gesture. Slowly, carefully, the two sides began to mirror each other, movement for movement, gesture for gesture. And then came the first words, harsh, guttural, unfamiliar, but unmistakable. The strangers spoke, not in song this time, but in language that could be translated only by tone and gesture. They spoke of the river, of the land around it, of the need to understand one another. The shaman replied, nodding, gesturing, making clear the same intentions. It was awkward, delicate, but it was communication. The first words carried more weight than any spear ever could. The exchange lasted hours. Each gift was acknowledged. Each gesture returned. Eyes scanned constantly, but slowly a rhythm developed, a shared understanding that neither side intended immediate harm. The sun moved high overhead, shadows stretched and shrank, and still, they stood there, careful, deliberate, testing the boundaries of this fragile meeting. Even the children in the camp felt the shift, for the air beyond the grass hummed differently. It was no longer the static tension of potential attack, nor the fearful wonder of distant song. It was alive with possibility. A spark of something new had entered the world, the knowledge that these strangers were not mere spirits of rumor, not fleeting shadows, but real people who might, through careful steps, become partners in survival. Yet the elders knew that the moment was delicate. One wrong movement, one misread gesture, and everything could shatter. Spears might fly, fires might burn, blood might stain the riverbank. And so they moved with caution, hearts steady, bodies alert, voices soft but deliberate, as if each action carried the weight of life itself. By evening, a rhythm had emerged. The strangers withdrew slightly, allowing the group to return to the edge of the clearing. No gifts were stolen. No spears were lifted in anger. And in that act alone lay a lesson almost as important as survival itself. Respect, patience, and attention could bridge even the vastest divides. And you, imagining yourself there, watching from the firelight, would see why the ancient river demanded more than strength, more than skill, more than hunger. It demanded awareness, judgment, courage, and restraint, the very qualities that decided not just whether you lived, but how you lived, in a world that would never forgive carelessness. The night fell, fires burned low, and for the first time, the camp slept with both relief and apprehension. They had met the strangers face to face. They had survived. But survival alone did not end the story. It was only the beginning.